Hey, team players, and welcome back. Love that we're starting off with questions off the bat. Again, Trade Tuesday is all about making your team the championship level team that we can do. One of the cool things that makes us special here at Local Football Flavor is the way that we go about getting our information, reducing the answers. We do this from a source that's not just all about clickbait. In fact, has no clickbait involved in it at all. What we do is we use the markets to tell us what the answers are, and we know how to read them in a way that really no one else. The true answers, that's what it's about, and that's what we're here to do. We love that we got questions fired up off the bat. We got you here all day, and that's what we're going to hit you with. So I said we start out with a deep dive here. Love it, guys. Love that the team players are doing as it's supposed to be, hitting the deep dives and quick hitters off the bat. So being said, we're going to still start with the deep dive here to start off with, and then dive into the quick hitters as their cues grow. 3 and 4, you have Allen, Saquon, Chase Brown, Tyreek, Zay, Laporta, Aubrey, Allen. All right. So what do we want to do to build this team up so we don't have to worry about it? So the first thing is you waited out the Tyreek Hill drama. With Tua coming back either next week or the week before, you're now going to have basically instant stud at your starting receiver spot. Zay and Pickens are going to give us some interesting weeks, just flat out. You know, we look at that game last week. Zay barely produces, but Lamar throws for 4 touchdowns. And it's just like, wow. Like, where is the consistency in this Baltimore offense? Because it's basically Henry or no one. So I think that Zay is truly getting captured in the Mark Andrews turmoil. Andrews wasn't ready, and they want to build back up his season stats. I do believe that car incident that happened before the season started is a much bigger deal than they ever let on. So, where I really think you need to do here, Ayush, is that you're so invested in Miami with Mostert, Tyreek, and Tua, is at this point, you just got to ride the train. As far as what I want to do to improve this team, I think Corum as a hold as a leverage, that's fine. If he goes off, he goes off. Same with Allen. Okay, we want to hold those two. Tracy and Juju should also be through the roof. So really, if I'm looking as far as what I want to do to improve this team, it's going to be probably a trade of Chase Brown and Leggett. So when we look here, we can probably upgrade to a nice, middle tierish back that's going to give us, probably realistically looking at a Cook type, someone that or Brian Robinson would be a good area to look here. That's kind of how I'm looking as far as looking at from the trade options here. So now that you're ranked 9th and you're on the chopping block, let you know there's a tie for a tie for first, 4-way tie for second, through. So we need to move, and we're going to get you through here. So here's some of your suggestions you threw at me here. Do you drop Leggett for Keon Coleman? That's a super upgrade immediately. If you don't want to do a trade involving Leggett, you do that. Quite frankly, maybe even do that regardless and get yourself prepared for potential trade. Again, overall, when I look at your roster here, it's not the worst roster in the world. But that running back 2 spot is something I want to do. Another area you could go to attack is try to upgrade the stability between Zay Flowers and Pickens. That's an option. I don't really want to get rid of 2 assets, though, to do that for the number 2 receiver, knowing that you're basically forcing Juju to be in your flex. What you really have is you have to have a lot of dancing around matchups. Laporta is killing you, but Laporta is also not really a tradable piece at this point. So what might also make sense is, like I said, you're at a spot where you have 2 of your bench spots are for the wild cards and Allen and Corum, which is fine. Leggett and Brown are the 2 I want to upgrade. If you can instantly upgrade Leggett for the Baltimore the Baltimore receiver, I'm all for that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. So that would kind of be my quick answers for you there, Ayush, and to go from there. And I know that earlier in the week, yesterday, we had some issues here with the quality of the stream. Comcast is supposedly on it, so we'll keep you guys updated as that goes around. And as always, guys, make sure you guys throw in your comments that either the quick hits or deep dives. I love that a couple of you guys are already doing it down there. Quincy, you're the next deep dive in the queue coming up here. So Ama hitting us off, or correction, Team Money. I don't mean to skip you here. Team Money, you got 10-man PPR, Burrow, Jacobs, Gibbs, Chase, Njoku. Your bench is Irving, Tracy, D-Hop. You should be hoping to trade D-Hop. Myers, Brooks on IR, any moves. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, I do think that you're holding either of the Tennessee receivers, hoping them to get moved to greener pastures, is probably not the worst idea anymore. Unless there's some stud sitting out on your waiver wire, you don't really have an asset. If they get moved, they could be amazing. If not, not. Bob and I had a conversation yesterday specifically focusing on Njoku. Njoku is a guy that Bob believes more strongly in I. Reason for that is that Bob's argument for Njoku is he's the only show in town. My argument is it doesn't matter if you're the only show in town if the quarterback can't get you the ball. So there's certainly upside there in terms of if the quarterback situation clicks. This is the week that he has to prove it, though. We now have a full week of game planning the starting quarterback, regardless of which one they choose. Doesn't matter. You have a full week of game planning without the Watson stink in the room. So if Njoku is going to be a dude, now is the time to do it. Bob thinks he's going to be. I don't. In terms of the rest of your roster, love your receiving room. How could you not? You're the only real weakness you potentially have, not even to say it's a weakness, it's that do we want to upgrade Worthy and or keep playing around with this game of who's my flex? If I'm going to upgrade this team Money, it's through Worthy. You have a chance of saying, hey, we got some really good upside pieces that we don't necessarily need. So we don't really need to have Myers and D-Hop on the roster. Now, Myers is the safer in case one of them go down, but you also have, like I said, you have two flexes in this league. You have DK in case one of your receivers go down. Bucky Irving is more than a fine, same with Tracy, as a fine plex play. So what I would do is I would try to package Worthy and Brooks probably, because Brooks has some name recognition, first pick, going to be coming back. You ate all the expense of him, and I would try to upgrade into another better flex. So I want to be doing a 2-for-1 upgraded trade to get into that neighborhood. Something that's going to be better than where you're at. That would be my answer for what I want to look to do with your team here, Team Money. Quick hitting time. Let's go. Chiefs defense or Vikings defense this week? All right. So looking at the season, when I go off of trying to choose which defense I want, I go off of who's going to allow the least amount of points. And you see scrolling past here, one of our slides is the defenses to pick up. Those are our top rated defense for the week overall. So as we look at it, the Vikings here we're projecting are going to be playing in a matchup where there's going to be some points scored for them. The Rams, on the other hand, are pretty much middle of the road. So Kansas City, on the other hand, we're projecting to be in essentially a pretty decent game here, where Kansas City is going to be only allowing 15 points. That to us is going to be the answer that you're going to want to play at. Playing against the Vegas Raiders, seeing that how bad Vegas is, 15.5 is going to be the direction you're going to go. Very few have games that you're going to get projected to put up less than 15.5. So that's a very long answer for a quick hitter, but Kansas City is going to be the answer there. And the reason they're not in the list by is because we pretty much deem they're not streamable right now because they're already on some roster. Welcome, Bob.
Hey,
what's the value you have for Olave in terms of running back? Welcome. So as a dude, he's a guy that we have never really been on the bus with. He's in trouble. Swift isn't exactly a great return either. Mike, I live in a spot where if you can do it, I do it. But I don't know if it's going to go through.
I don't think I don't think I'd do that. In a couple weeks, Carr will be coming back, which definitely boosts the value a little bit. If I need a running back too, and Olave is the guy I'm going to trade, I do think it's fair enough to trade him for a guy like Swift. He's been producing coming off, they're coming off the bye week coming up. I think it's fair enough that you can try for it. But like Joe said, I'm not sure that actually gets it done right now because there's not many people buying into Olave at this point because of the injury and because of the quarterback situation. Again, Jake Haener might play this week because Rattler got injured as well. So that's something to consider.
Next quick hitter. Another one from Ama. Rachaad White is back with Godwin and Evans out. He had a huge PPR night.
He's back on the menu, boys.
Talk about the worst case scenario for injury world, man.
Yeah,
so as I look at this here, Ama, we're not fans of Rachaad White. I mean, he's not a better talent. He's not more talented than Bucky. But you're right. Someone had to take the checkdowns, and he was there. So, I mean, maybe this guy just keeps getting lucky in terms of being in a situation blessing. But he talent-wise, we're not in love with him moving forward. Where's your take, Bob?
Realistically speaking, Amon, when it comes to Rachaad White, I mean, I know yesterday that I said that he was droppable. And, he was up until this moment in time a droppable candidate. I mean, you look at his stats in PPR, they're very much back end flex type of numbers. Outside of two good games prior to this past week, all of them were below 10. So you weren't even thinking about flexing him, or you shouldn't have been in a lot of those games. Granted, some of them were against some decent competition in Detroit and Denver, but I think that he's back on the menu. And the reason I think he's back on the menu is because I don't think that, Jalen McMillan's being a rookie, but I don't think outside of Godwin and Evans that the Tampa Bay pass catchers are particularly, that they stand out as dominating any of the targets. So what we saw from Rachaad White is a nice baseline, actually, for what he's potentially able to do. 8 to 10 carries a game, 4 to 6 passes a game, receptions, and anywhere between 50 to 100 yards is probably within his baseline now, where with Mike Evans and Godwin it wasn't. So that was a very big shift in the numbers. He put up an amazing game points wise, and that came predominantly through the air. The running game, he's still terrible in the running game, but as a pass catcher he's pretty good. And that was something that was always true about him, realistically.
Sure is.
So that for anybody that owns Rachaad White, he's back on the menu, and I think that he fits right in well as a flex spot moving forward.
This is Baker.
Definitely moving forward. All right, Joe, let's rack them up.
Dude, I'm going to kill Comcast. Literally had to be on the phone with them for 2 hours yesterday, and all they're doing is dropping the stream left and right. Like, this is so glad I'm paying for $1,200 and I'm not even getting a full $1,000.
Yeah, I got
full,
you.
half of that,
I'll
quarter
chime
of that
on that DD as well.
when we actually need it.
All right, Joe, lay it on us. We doing another quick hit, or we going
jumping
back?
So deep dive? Here, Ayesha was the deep dive that started the day. Bob, why don't we dive into that real quick? Give me your answer. What would you do to this team?
What would I do with this team?
Because I gave my answer to start the show.
All right. So there's a couple players on your team that are, as I said, with Rachaad White back on the menu, as in George Pickens with Russ Wilson. We said that was a possibility. His schedule looks really good at the back half of the season. So, he was one of those pieces you could trade out of or into, depending on how you valued him. The Zay Flowers usage in that game, I didn't really like that at all. One catch, which was, nothing. But Lamar definitely fed the ball to Bateman because the coverage was better, to just move the ball downfield in that way. And then in the end zone area, just passing it to Mark Andrews, which kind of is an old reliable for Lamar Jackson. I think where I would go with this, Ayush, I'm okay with your running back room. I think that moving forward, you're going to have a couple good weeks out of them. Tyreek with Tua coming back. I like that you have Tua there. but I don't see the necessity with Josh Allen and Tua. So I'm pretty comfortable with your team right now. But one thing that I will say, I do like the long-term hold value of Braylon Allen. But with Breece Hall performing the way he has over the last 2 weeks with Aaron Rodgers basically as the head coach of the offense there, I wouldn't really think about putting Braylon Allen in my lineup anytime soon. And the same thing goes for Corum. These two guys are just purely handcuffs I use. So when it comes down to it, you have only 3 other usable assets on your team, where Xavier Legette, we'll see what happens with him in the future. And realistically, only 2 usable assets, with Juju's injury making him an unusable asset right now. So realistically, you just have Mostert and Tyrone Tracy right now. So where I fall in is if you want to improve this team any and make it better, or at least make it more consistent, you might be able to pair up Tracy and Juju or Tracy and Legette to maybe get you something else. But I think that right now, capital-wise, I wouldn't really move much. I don't think that the players that you have on your bench are able to upgrade you significantly in any way, shape, or form. And you would have to take one of the players that's in your starting lineup, let's say Chase Brown, and pair him with a guy like Juju or pair him with a guy like Tyrone Tracy to really elevate, if you wanted to elevate into something better. You might be able to buy the dip with J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins had a bad game because he was scripted out of that game for the most part. You realistically probably couldn't get into an Aaron Jones right now. You might, but you would have to include Chase Brown. So it really depends upon, your feelings of Chase Brown. But I think right now your starting lineup is good enough to win a decent amount of games going forward. All right, Joe.
That's pretty much what I said, Bob, there as your answer before. So,
Joe, what I'm going to need from you, because
on the same page there.
Joe, I don't know if you're when you're glitching.
So let's get into the next one, which is going to be Quincy's deep dive, and then we'll get all your quick hits thereafter.
Before we get into that, this is just a quid pro quo. I don't know if you're glitching or not when you're silent. So when we go forward, I need you to say something so I know that you're not glitching.
How so?
Like, just say something so that I know that you're not because you're static on the screen. It was just weird.
I'm listening. I'm being so enthralled. I'm engulfing every word you say, Bob. But yeah, but you are right. This Comcast thing is killing me beyond all measures.
Yeah.
All right. So, but for your deep dive here, Quince, drop Tank Tell over Jennings. Yes, I think I'm on the bus with doing that as a starting point. Your receivers are Lamb, Debo, Cup, Mooney, Jennings. Was the right deal to get him or not? I do believe it was the right deal to get Jennings instead of Tank Dell. Starting point. So that's how I believe it. I think Jennings has a chance of being an absolute stud for you for the rest of the year, and Tank Dell is going to be a declining asset. So just looking at that, that's strictly based upon the injury situations around them. So that would be my answer for you, Quincy. I do think you did the right thing, and I think you did it with the right people.
Yeah, and Quincy, as far as this player combination is concerned, I do think it's reasonable, like Joe said, to have gone out and got Jennings. When it comes to these passing games, all of the injuries in the league so far has made this a really kind of difficult framework for the fantasy community, because we are currently in a mode where week after week after week after week, the second best player, the third best player, the 15th best player, they're all getting hurt with these injuries that either are long-term or could be nagging injuries. But when we look at Jennings, he's already hurt, right? So he was dealing with the hip thing. But when he comes back, what we saw metrics-wise was that when one of those wide receivers is absent, Jennings does fine. So when one of the wide receivers is absent, Jennings does fine. When both of them are present, he's an unusable asset. So you went out there, you bought into him, and let's face it, Tank Dell is in a similar position, a similar situation. Last week, he was targeted, 4 times, didn't manage to connect on any of those targets, was looked at in the end zone, which was nice. But again, when Nico comes back, these are decisions you have to make. While I think that Tank Dell is a hold for certain teams, I think that a guy like Jennings puts your team in a better position to win. His ADOT is 12.5. So he's involved a good amount. He's targeted. He's used. They use him to move down the field, and they're going to need to use him because they don't have that asset anymore. And Ricky Pearsall doesn't profile the same way as Jennings does. And you saw when Jennings has the opportunity to be open, right? And just in general be open, he can do a lot with what he has. So I think that, Tank Dell provides a different type. He's a different type of player than Jennings is. And their situations, Jennings' situation is better knowing that Ayuk is not coming back. Pearsall is a rookie. He's a veteran, so he's going to be relied on in situations where a rookie might not be relied on. And so while I don't think you're going to have to start Jennings on a week-to-week basis moving forward with Lamb, Debo, and Kupp, I do think it's a nice one piece on that bench that if you were to make a trade or anything, you do have a piece, like say you wanted to trade Debo or trade Kupp, you have a piece in Jennings to hold on to who's going to have value moving forward.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to that, and you're right. So long story short, to Quincy, it was the right call. I mean, I think that's the thing there to really take away with. And as always, guys, we appreciate you guys are leaving the deep dives and the quick hits in your entries. Jesse, we see you got 2 in here. You will be our next deep dive coming up. But now it's time to jump into the quick hitters. And the whole question is, which one did I leave off on? I believe it's right here with Gozy's first quick hitter of the day. 2-team question. Who can I drop to make some room on your IR? Team number 1. Mostert, Singletary, Komet. Singletary is the one I'm cutting to that group. How about you, Bob?
Singletary by far and away.
All right. Cool. Group 2. Who to cut from there? Keenan Allen, Ridley, Adunze, Chase Brown. Bob, it's my boy versus your boy. Who do you want to cut?
So I think where I'm at on this is I would definitely cut Ridley, but I do understand Joe's point of holding on to him until maybe the trade deadline passes for the NFL. So I would think that Odunze, I think Odunze or Ridley would be the guy I would cut. I think Ridley I would cut now because I don't think he'd get picked up right now because he's been playing so poorly. Odunze still has that.
There's something to that. My fundamental answer is you don't need 2 Bears ever, especially at receiver.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
All right, Carlos, 10-team PPR dynasty.
Just got
Puka for a
deep at wide receiver. Do I send Addison for Kelsey? I wouldn't. You're in a dynasty league, Carlos, and these younger players do have long-term value. And Kelsey's short-term value, again, I think that what we've seen anything of tight ends, and Mr. Wumbo, you can share this with the group as well, is that to be a top 10 tight end this year, you only have to produce 10 points a week. In a 10-team PPR dynasty format, I'm not trading a player like Addison who has some upwards potential that might not have been realized yet for a tight end that's an aging asset. So,
Carlos, the only way I'm doing this is that if you're getting a first-round pick in return, even if it's a 2-year from now first pick, I want a first-rounder in return if you're doing this. Being deep at receiver, I like trading from a strength, but you need to make sure you're getting the draft capital to replace it. Because quite frankly, Kelsey's not going to be in the league 2 years from now. So you got to be able to make sure you have capital to supplement your trade. And if someone's desperate and looking for it, you might be able to get that kind of play.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Should I drop Juju for McMillan? I'm sitting on Juju. I mean,
Yeah.
the number one receiver in Kansas City.
So where I fall on this,
I think we're just putting subtitle "fuck Comcast."
I will say this, Jesse, is that I do like Juju a lot, but Dobbs has shown a decent amount. But what I will caution with, as this is a quick hit, is that while the Green Bay room is talented and while they're going to continue to score, we knew this going into the season that on a weekly, daily basis, it's going to change based upon what the defenses are throwing out at them. When it comes to Juju, if he is healthy, he's the option. Worthy is becoming an option. Worthy was getting a better role in that game because of, Juju's, health. But at that same point in time, I will say that it's possible, even though that the Chiefs said that they wouldn't, it's possible that they do go out there and get another wide receiver. So I say I'm sticking with Juju. I can make a case for Dobbs and I can make a case for McMillan, but I'm sticking with Juju right now.
Is Ricky Parasol a must add? I have waiver priority. So, Ahmad, I don't think so. We saw Parasol get targets, but that was also because Debo was out as well. Jennings is ahead of him on the chart. Jennings is the one who is going to sneak into that Ayuk position. Quite frankly, Parasol is a very good comp for Debo. He's the long-term answer for that. So I don't believe that Debo is going to be out with pneumonia for the rest of the year. I don't even think he's missing this week because that's what he's was taken out for last week. So Parasol, he's Debo insurance. So I'm not using a waiver priority at all. I would use it on Jennings, but I'm not going to use it on Parasol.
Yeah, and I held a guy like McMillan for a long time until I needed to deal with a lot of stuff on my bench with injuries and stuff. I'm dealing that again with Mike Evans and Dallas Goedert, both hurt now. Losing, I lost by 0.45, I believe, last night, which was rough. But when it comes to it, Joe's absolutely right. Ricky Pearsall is an insurance play with some upwards mobility with the injuries to these core wide receivers, but I don't think it's a necessity to add him on waivers right now, especially if you have the number one.
Hey, Bob, remember the whole offseason when I kept saying Kittle should be the number one tight end? Kittle's our number one tight end. And you're like, nah, man, he's going to get so cannibalized.
I didn't say that.
It's been a really good 6th-round pick we kept making.
You said Ingram. I said Kittle.
I wanted both. There are a couple teams we have both on.
I agreed with that statement. Go ahead.
Love
T Money.
Should I drop D-Hop for Jalen on the Bucks? Rome. Can we stop calling him Pop Douglas? Like, can that be a thing, or is that going to be a thing for him?
That's his nickname. It's better than
we couldn't get the Rattler gun to work, but we got to deal with this.
Yeah. Here's how I would order that. Right now. I would order it Jalen, Wicks, Douglas, Rome. That would be my order if I was dropping Hopkins. Again, Hopkins is one of those aging stars that could also be on the block to trade as well, that might have a better situation with another team. But rookie wide receivers do take some time to come along. And I'm not saying Jalen McMillan is going to put up a masterclass in the next several games, but, and Wicks and like we said about Wicks a couple weeks back with the dropsies and the target share, if you're going after any Green Bay wide receiver, you got to expect, like I expect with Jaden Reed, you got to expect good games with bad games. And so if you are, what is your plan, T-Money, when you pick up these guys? Are they insurance to a starter that you already have, or are you putting them and inserting them in your starting lineup right away? Because like right now, Wicks and Douglas do have starting back end flex value right now.
But Jalen might have the best rest of season value.
And Jalen could project better rest of season. So if you want someone rest of season, it's Jalen, I think. But if you want someone for the right now for like bye weeks and stuff, it's probably either Wicks or Douglas.
Cool. Trade Pollard, T, and Kyler for Breece. He loves his depth of receiver. I'm all for trading T. Higgins. Let's start with that. I do believe Breece Hall is back. I don't think you're getting this one through. because 3-for-1s in general are just hard to do. But in terms of what you're giving and getting, I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah. I'm actually, I like Pollard, and I do like T. Again, T is one of those players as well, like Joe's shared multiple times, that is going to have those up and down games despite having a good amount of the target share on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Kyler, for me, again, if he's not rushing in a touchdown, I have him in my 2-team quarterback league. He's not worth playing in a 10-team or 12-team league. Go out and get somebody different. Move on from him. I think you're getting the best player in the deal. You're giving up a good amount to get him, but it's a fair amount to get him. So I would do that, Adam. And Joe, I'm just going to come down real quick to here is that I'm amazed on a daily basis by what I hear NFL players going through. Like Isaiah Pacheco damn near broke his leg, right? And he's walking on a treadmill after a couple of weeks. I'm like, if that was me, I'd be guy sick for like ever, right? If that happened to me, I wouldn't be getting up off the couch, but this is their job. So the secret advancements in these NFL drugs, like, you know, you constantly hear like, oh, this player dislocated their knee. They popped it back in, took a shot of cortisone, and they're back on the field running 50 yards down the field. That's nuts to me. That is nuts.
So there are two long-term secrets that in general they have. First off, there is superpowers in cow. If you only eat cow, your life becomes better. It doesn't even matter what format of cow you're eating. That's a fact. The second one is there's
Nick,
true power in
KJ,
ice bath.
we see you. Big Mac, we see you.
No, for real. There's a ton of healing power in ice baths. Like your body is constantly creating more rejuvenation with that. And another thing that a lot of them do that doesn't get enough credit is they give blood a lot in the off season. So your body's constantly turning those things on. But hit a quick aside. What the hell is Jameson Williams doing for the third year in a row to get caught doing PEDs? Like, what the hell are you doing?
Two game suspension coming down the pipeline for him. That's going to be nice for those Laporta owners and nice for those Khalif Raymond owners, nice for those Amon-Ra owners. Same with Montgomery and Gibbs. Nino, do I trade Kupp and Wandale for Neighbors? I would hold. I think it's worth considering, but I would
because Wandale gets better with Neighbors, and I believe Kupp's better than all three of them.
I would definitely hold on that.
I don't want to do that one.
Who could I package Pollard and T or Pollard and Kyler for? I want a running back in a decent offense. Pollard, excuse me. I think what you put together is fine. I think that Pollard plus T plus Kyler, you're using some of your strengths to go after a weakness of yours. I think it's a smart thing to do.
We were good with that one, Adam.
Thoughts on buying Jacoby Myers? Would you send Charbonnet for him? So two frameworks to think about here, Ryan. Right now, yeah, I would. But Ken Walker is like a ticking time bomb in terms of injuries at any one point in time. Charbonnet, I think out of every handcuff that we talk about on our show and every handcuff that we throw into our lineup, that he is one of the most valuable handcuffs because when he gets inserted into the game, he is a capable player.
Sure is.
His pathway to play is fairly reasonable knowing Ken Walker's history. So if you're planning on playing Jacoby Myers this week after he becomes not injured, then I think it's worth considering. But if Jacoby Myers is just going to be a decision-making piece as a back-end flex, right now, I wouldn't.
Yeah, you'd have to be starting Myers because I was huge. Two of the players I was really big on in the offseason was Jacoby Myers and Brandon Cooks. Almost every single one of our dynasty teams had at least one of the two, if not both of them on it for our best balls. I was constantly all over both of them. And quite frankly, Myers got the absolute best case scenario. Adams got moved like I was called. He was the number one receiver, but he's not getting over that 14.5 threshold like I thought would be his floor. I thought Myers had serious potential of being like the secret sauce of winning a league, like crazy stupid. And he still might, but there's a lot of brokenness in the Raiders uniform. Wow, if that's not the tagline of a quarter of a century, I don't know
Yeah,
what is.
and I think to that end, Ryan, with him being inactive over the last 2 weeks, with Gardner Minshew coming back in, he definitely has a lot of value. So it is worth thinking about. But again, I think I'd only think about it if I were to start him, and I was planning on starting him.
And all guys who are sending out your questions, make sure you start them with either DDs or quick hits so we get to them appropriately. Bob, we're starting to get a little behind on our DDs
Hold
here.
On. Wumbo, is this in reference to Rachaad White? Because if so, I love this. I love this a lot. So we're going to jump into a couple DDs now. Smitty, we see you. Patrick, we see you. Austin, we see you. Big Mac, we see you. KJ, Nick, Jesse, Wumbo, PJ.
We see you all. We'll hit every single one of your questions.
We're gonna hit.
If you didn't tell us, if you didn't tell us it's a deep dive or not, we're gonna assume it's a quick hitter. So Jesse with 2 DDs in a row here. Njoku or Otten. We kind of got into a little bit yesterday about what Njoku is. Njoku is pretty much the only target in a world where he has a blind guy throwing him the ball. So he's going to get the target share, but you're never going to get an accurate pass. Otten, on the other hand, just skyrocketed in his target share. Competent quarterback. For me, that's a no doubt. I don't want Njoku. I don't want anything to do with Cleveland. I mean, guys, don't pick up people from Cleveland.
Okay,
I mean, that's just my feeling of life.
So let's kind of pull the wool back a little bit more in terms of where these values kind of truly lie, right? So as we stated yesterday, Njoku is the best pass catcher on that team, and it's not realistically that close. And so
Judy's the only one who's fighting with them, and Judy has been sad.
It's one of those things where we need to consider this as a piece where when you're the best player on a team that realistically outside of Nick Chubb is going to probably, Cedric Tillman and Judy are going to get pieces because that's the way the NFL works. And the tight end position, like we've said at the top of the show, and like I said yesterday, you only need to get 10 points a week to really realistically be a top 10 tight end in a week. Njoku has an easy pathway to get there. He's probably going to get a good amount of targets, like we said yesterday. You can go back and watch that part, or and some yards. But the touchdowns are probably going to be a fleeting thing in this offense, depending on what quarterback they start. I heard they also picked up Bailey Zappi, so maybe they don't trust Jameis Winston as much, which is, okay. But one of the facts that needs to be...
It doesn't matter what quarterback they start. They ain't scoring.
Here's the other fact that needs to be true, and is true. I know it was a different offensive coordinator last year, but Cade Otton, at certain points in time in the season last year, was realistically used in the red zone. Also, going back into the stats this year, can you tell me who the top 4 tight ends, Joe, are in terms of target share or in terms of targets? Just targets, not target share.
Otten has to be in the top 4 just because Mike Evans has been blanketed so much.
Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Kittle, Otten. Those are the top 4 tight ends in terms of targets. Granted, he is 11th in terms of yards, and with 100 of those yards coming yesterday. But it needs to, that point needs to be made, is that the whole Tampa Bay offense just got a lot less sexy to be involved in. And Baker is still a good quarterback, and he's going to have to prove, because this is now Cleveland level offensive skill position player wise that you're working with now. I think Otten's a definite buy. If you would ask me yesterday, I think that both of these players are really close. And I think that rest of season, they kind of project fairly the same. But both of these players have a good chance to finish it within the top 8 of tight ends by year's end, with Cade Otton maybe having a better chance to get a couple more touchdowns. But realistically, they are probably
that ain't a maybe, Bob. That's a
They're
definite.
they're probably both not going to get over 6 touchdowns. And
I don't know about that now.
They're probably not going to both get over like 800-ish, 900-ish yards. So
see, I think Otten, I think just being borderline a dude. I think.
I mean, he definitely looked good in garbage time.
I think that his window of opportunity is there. Tampa can still pretty well. And but bottom line though is Tampa's offense is going to score at least as a team 20 more touchdowns than Cleveland's offense. That's a fundamental fact.
And that's fair.
So I want to be on the part with the bigger pie. It's just that straightforward. So
That's
Jesse,
fair.
since we felt like that was kind of a cheap deep dive, because it was kind of straightforward, let's give you your second one here while we're on them. 2 and 5 need help to start. 2 receivers, 1 flex. Who do you start behind this grouping? CD, London, Devontae Smith, Harrison Jr., Dell, Bigsby, Tracy.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you straight up, Jesse. These are the 2 people that I'm not even thinking about. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Dell. Those are 2 players that I'm not even thinking about going into this week. Okay,
starting with the negative, eh?
that I think it's pretty clear that Dell's opportunities are that Dell is going to have opportunities to score. And Dell put up a good game, 2 weeks ago. And the whole offense was pretty much a stink bomb this past week, other than Joe Mixon. But it's fairly certain that, at least for Houston, is that knowing that they have that piece in Joe Mixon and don't have to really force the ball to even win or to get close to winning the game, I think is a piece that is less in Dell's favor. When it comes to Marvin Harrison Jr., this is a coaching thing and a player reception thing, where the coaching staff either isn't drawing up the right routes, isn't making the game plan
competent,
isn't making the game plan feature him. So for me right now, Marvin Harrison Jr., if you would ask me a couple weeks ago, I had better expectations for him, but I'm out. I'm out right now on Marvin Harrison Jr. He can very easily put me back in with a 15-point game. But right now I'm out. He's not getting enough usage, not getting enough yards. It's not worth it. So this comes down to Lamb, London, Smith at the wide receiver positions, and then Bigsby and Tracy sitting there at the flex position. So, Joe, now that we have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Dell out of the way, who do you think? Who do you think?
Well, I think the 2 no-brainers you're starting are going to be CD and Smith. That to me is the easy starting spot. Devontae Smith, I still believe in. I believe in very strongly in Devontae Smith. And CeeDee Lamb is one of the highest second half of his season producers we have projected here. So, again, that's a night game. I think CD is going to be on fire coming out of his bye. And then, again, just Devontae Smith's just, like I said, a guy that I'm all about here. Now it gets interesting, though, on the flex between Bigsby, Tracy, and London. I like Bigsby. I'm biased. I'm a running back guy. I got to say that outright. Tracy gets a ton of targets, but he also got a lot of those targets when Neighbors is out. So I probably would go for the remaining flex of Bigsby, London, Tracy. That being said, I'm a little higher on Harrison Jr. than you are, but that's probably how I would rank this. So total ranking for me: Lamb, Smith, Bigsby, London, Harrison, Tracy, Dell.
Yeah, and I think right now, as we sit on Tuesday, now this might change a little bit as the week goes on. Let me take a look at something really quickly. So coming down, I think it's fair to assume that Devonta Smith is going to be a good start this week. The Bengals secondary, while they might tighten the ship at one point in time, I think A.J. Brown is going to feast. We'll have to look into the metrics a little bit more. As we sit here on Tuesday, I think Devonta Smith is a definite must start for me. Coming down again, the Buccaneers got their back end talent back in their defense, but they still struggled to stop Rashad Bateman. and they still struggled to stop, Lamar didn't throw a lot of passes in that game, right? But 5 touchdowns is nothing to ignore. So I think it's worth considering, especially in a divisional matchup, that London would be a respectable play as well. So if you're vacillating a little bit on Smith or London, I think that later on in the week we can take a look at that a little bit more, Jesse. But I think Joe's right when it comes to the flex, that I would start one of those running backs in the flex. And when it comes to opportunities, I don't really know how many opportunities Bigsby is going to have against the Packers. This is coming from a Bigsby owner, in that the Packers can make a lot of mistakes, but their defense is very good. And they're very good, particularly in the second half of games. And so if the Jaguars are behind, Bigsby's not the guy that's getting them back into the game. He's not used as their primary pass catching back. And so I think that Bigsby, depending on that game script, he's a reasonable start in a flex position, but I think he's a tough start for me in the flex position this week. So then I look at the Giants with Tyrone Tracy, and I see that, the Giants probably aren't going to win that game. But at the same point in time, the Steelers' defense is not buckled up at all, at any stretch of the imagination. And Breece Hall is a better player than Tyrone Tracy, but we've seen over the last several weeks, the Steelers can't really stop anybody on the ground, which is disappointing, knowing the Steelers' pedigree for having a good run-stopping defense. I think it, is affected by injuries and Alex Highsmith and things like that. But at the same point in time, I think right now as I sit on Tuesday that I'm definitely starting Lamb. I'm at a decision point with London and Smith and then Tracy. But you could easily talk me in right now on Tuesday into Lamb, London, and Smith, because I do think that they have the better opportunities, but I do like the idea of Tracy in the flex this week. And that's just on Tuesday. We can talk more about it a little bit later in the week as well. All right.
Yeah.
So let's get into
a couple. Fair answer too, man.
Let's get into a couple of the quick hits here. Joe, we just touched on a bunch. Patrick here.
If you go to the one that has the star with Quincy, that'll be where we left off on the quick hits for you, Bob.
Patrick, start one. Would drop Kirk if needed. Dak versus San Fran, Kirk versus Tampa, Tua versus Arizona, Russ versus the Giants, 4-point passing touchdown. So I think it's reasonable to think that Kirk Cousins could have a nice bounce back game. I'm not really touching Dak. I have Dak, I think, but I don't really want to start him in a 10-team one quarterback league. So this comes down to Tua. This comes down to Tua or Russ for me. And the Giants defense didn't look as great as they could have this past week, but also, Jalen Hurts as a quarterback didn't do a lot through the air against them. He only went 10 for 14. So I'm hesitant on putting Russ into the starting line because I think the Giants defense, especially the back end, might be a little bit better than we expect in terms of stopping teams from getting into the end zone through the air. So
that's a fair point. You just have the wrong reason. The reason the Giants are stopping people is their pass rush is way better than it was supposed to be. Not because they can cover.
Well, yeah, the pass rush is good. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
It's way better than it was supposed to be.
But I will also say that it's tough for me to start. I think the way I would order this would be Tua, Dak, Kirk, Russ, in that order, because I think Tua has the better potential to move the ball against this Arizona defense. I mean, Justin Herbert had
Tua's definitely number one, Bob. There's no fight on that. The only where I'm going to fight you is the second spot. I just saw Kirk go for like 500 against Tampa 2 weeks ago. I'm discounting that. So I'm putting Kirk second. But yeah, you're right. Either way, Russ is a distant fourth.
Distant fourth.
Smitty,
start one, Dell, Addison, or Flowers. as we sit here on Tuesday, my initial lean would be Flowers. Facing off against the Browns, that's a nice enough matchup for him. It'd be
I understand 70-0.
What?
Could that be like a college score? Could it be 70-0?
I don't know. But I do think that what we saw this week definitely speaks to the detriments of owning Flowers, which is something that, everybody is cautious of, is that he can be scripted out of the game because this team is so good offensively and they can beat you so many ways that while it's great to own an asset from a great offense like this,
sure is.
He could be played out of the game. Addison's going to be a tough start for me. I know that they play against the Rams, but also that's a Thursday game. So, Jefferson could easily take over that game. Jones could easily take over that game. I think as I fall right now on Tuesday, that I go Flowers, Addison with Dell, a distant third, just right now.
Yeah. Hard to
All
fight
right.
that.
Let's get down here. Thoughts on my 6-1 team, 12-team PPR, Patrick. Dak Kirk, running backs Gibbs, Pollard, Javonte, Brown, Irving, A.J. Brown, Waddle, Higgins, Leggett, Juju, Godwin, Rice, Laporta. So I think you have a solid enough team. You definitely got bit by the injury bug. Keeping Javonte around, maybe it rewarded you. Maybe you started him in the flex this past week. Maybe he rewarded you. I don't see a lot of Javonte games like that, but you're 6-1.
Get rid of him.
You're 6-1. So where I fall on this is that if I were you and I was looking as a way to improve my team, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, I would go after the best 2 wide receivers that I could possibly get. Waddle's probably going to have a lot of value, but moving forward, with A.J. Brown already having his bye, Godwin going down, Godwin was probably the guy you started there. I think what I would do is I would go out and try to find the best wide receiver 2 that I could find, or the best running back 2 I could find, and trade some of those assets that I have at the back end.
Yeah, combine Javonte or Pollard with Higgins. Higgins should be the one that you move out of this team. He's going to get your best return. I'm 100% sure he's not going to be a valuable asset once fantasy playoffs comes to pass. Get Higgins traded to upgrade that slot.
Yeah. Austin, should I trade Aaron Jones, Kyle Pitts, and Wandale for Bijan? I'm 5-2 and have Brock Bowers and Neighbors. This makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, do that.
For anybody watching right now, this is a type of trade that you're trading. You already have some players either on the same team, or you have that another tight end. Brock Bowers is performing well. Kyle Pitts is performing well enough. He's a usable asset. I do love Aaron Jones, but I like Bijan more. And you have 2 players that I really love in this deal. I think I would do that in a heartbeat. Big Mac, 10-team, 7-0. Love that for you. Love that. I have Geno, Goff, Saquon, JT, Amon-Ra, DJ Moore, Bowers, Olave, Waddle. Bench, I have Brian Thomas Jr., Hunt, Chubb, Goddard, Pop, Douglas. Would you rather have Geno or Tua rest of season? There's a lot of ways that you can look at this. Geno is on a team that passes it the most. I believe he still has the most passing attempts in the league at 279. Coming down, getting into some meat and potatoes of the schedule. Buffalo and the Rams up next. Those are 2 defenses that he could definitely do better against. After that bye, you have divisional matchups against San Fran, Arizona. Week 13 against the Jets, and then week 14 at Arizona. I think where I fall on this, Big Mac, is that Geno for me without DK, if DK were to miss any extended time, we'll have to look at those reports. I don't know towards the latter half of the season how much he could keep this up. We saw him kind of fall off 2 years ago or so towards the back end of the season. So I'm not realistically buying into the long-term value of Geno, but I do think he's valuable right now. I like Tua the rest of the season. I think that if he plays and is healthy, he could be absolutely electric. Again, last year, I believe it was, although he didn't put up the best fantasy numbers, he was He had the most he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league last year. So I think I'm taking Tua rest of the season.
I'm going to be taking Tua too, but I need to say this out front, or else I'll feel like a horrible person if it comes to pass. We're all being super optimistic that Tua is not going to break again.
Yeah.
To Wombo's comment before, he broke like a Girl Scout. Like we see these NFL players that are walking through fire, and it just is just concerning. You know, you get a finger on him, everyone in the league knows it. And it's not like he's not playing good pass rushes the rest of the season. They play Buffalo and the Jets again still. So in a vacuum, if this were Madden and I can turn injuries off, it's Tua all day. I especially with concussions, you know, they're so volatile, especially with him. Tua is still my answer, but it's not by as much as it should be.
But I will say this: I don't really want to own him for the fantasy playoffs.
No, I don't want that either. So the answer might be let Tua come back, let him ball out, and then move him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Mr. Wombo, it sucks. You know, all these injuries are terrible. So trying to trade Jamar plus a decent bench piece to those that lost Godwin or Evans with a bad bench. So Chase plus Myers plus a McConkey for JJ and Cup. Chase plus Myers or Ladd for CD and MHJ. Mr. Wombo, my initial my initial thought with this is to go with JJ and Cup. That is my initial thought because, like I said earlier about MHJ, I'm just not sure when he becomes a usable asset again. But I do know that JJ and Cup have usability right now. Say Cup comes back healthy, right? I think I'm on the JJ Cup side. It's close, but I think I'm more so on that side. Where are you at on that, Joe?
Yeah, how can you not be on JJ? I mean, I'm on JJ. I mean, with all that adding up, I'm on Team JJ. At the end of the day, you need to have the most elite player. I mean, yeah, volume's nice and all, but JJ's the answer.
Yeah. Coming down here to Nick. Trade Hubbard and MHJ for Jaden Reed. I would definitely think about it. Jaden Reed's one of my favorite players. You can be concerned about his usage the last 2 games, but he's also been dealing with an ankle injury the last 2 games. Again, he didn't pop up on the injury report later on in the week and said he was healthy to go, but we've seen players, like to Mr. Wumbo's point about secret NFL drugs, is to say he's still dealing with it. He's not like, and they don't have to use him, right? If he's not healthy, they didn't have to use him. So he's definitely a guy that has big boom potential. With the return of Brooks pending, I think it's reasonable to go out and trade him, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr.'s underperformance, if you're kind of sick of him. Would you drop Etienne or Pacheco for Dobbs or McMillan? You know, Jesse, when it comes to this,
Dobbs,
when it comes to this, I think that while we saw Pacheco on the treadmill, he's still about a month away. He's still about a month away if he were to return. And realistically speaking, does he even return this season? So I think I'm comfortable dropping Pacheco for Dobbs. I think I'm comfortable with something like that. Nick, can I get through the rest of the season with Bijan, Pollard, and Dobbins? Yes, you can. I think these 3 running backs could get you through to the end of the season. There's going to be some pain a little bit in certain games. Pollard is already dealing with a little bit of injury stuff. And Dobbins could get scripted out of certain games if they fall behind. But they're committed to running the ball. Bijan looks great. I think this is a 3 running back combination that can do really well long term. Should I trade Devonta Smith and Chase Brown for Cooper and Connor? This is a reasonable trade to make. But I think I'm sticking. I think right now on Tuesday as it sits, I think I'd much rather prefer the Devonta Smith Chase Brown side, but the volume is definitely on the Cooper Connor side. So if you are going strictly for volume here, Noah, I would hit that there. If you're going strictly for volume, I'd go Cooper and Connor. But if you like the potential of what Chase could give you, and Devonta Smith is a solid kind of player, he didn't perform well last week. But if you're going with volume, I think I'd go there.
Guys, I got to tell you, if you're looking for winning your championship, which you should be, Amari Cooper's not the answer. He's the sexy pick for the second of right now. He doesn't perform when it's cold out. He never has in his career. He's not going to now. Bob, you keep going ahead, and you and Wombo are having so much fun with each other.
This is just funny because this was speaking about Jameson Williams. And then, do drugs again because there's no way they'd assume you're that stupid, so they shouldn't test you again. But this is the framework of a lot of people, coming out of college, right? When you go to a job interview and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And then you're like, oh, but I can do it when I'm done. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, shit, something's good. Like it happens. Like mental capacity, right? PJ, I just traded Debo, Laporta, and BTJ.
Way to put good teacher spin on that, Bob.
I just traded Debo, Laporta, BTJ for CD, Chubb, and Charbonnet. Did I win? We won't know if you won, but you have Cup, London, and Nico already. I think that this type of trade, looking at it, it's looking like you're looking for some potential running back future prospects in this year. I think you gave up a lot because BTJ, while he's flying high right now, and he is for good reason flying high from a metric standpoint. I think that he wasn't, when Nico's healthy, he's not cracking your starting lineup, right? And when Debo is healthy, Debo's already dealing with some injuries. If it's a 3 wide receiver start when Nico comes back, probably isn't starting in your starting lineup like he would be starting in your starting lineup. But the decision was down to Debo and BTJ. You went out and you got CD, who's a definitive start the rest of the season.
Yeah.
You're in a couple weeks, you'll be rolling out Debo, Nico, and Cup. And all 3 of those guys have the potential to put up 20-plus points a game if their heads and their ankles are screwed on straight. So I think that while you gave up a lot of name recognition and a lot of potential points, you got back a great player, the best player in the deal.
You did.
And Chubb and Charbonnet, for me, I wish you would have tried to go out and get a little bit more, PJ. But I think realistically speaking, this trade feels like Debo and BTJ for CD, and that's a fair enough trade within the market that we've seen CD right
now.
No,
I like it overall. Bringing back the best player. I do think you're overvaluing Chubb, but clearly you're in need of some receiver or some backing help. So
the running back room is now, so it's now Hurts, Saquon, Breece, CD, London, Kraft, and Cup with Nico on.
Oh yeah, all you needed was the stud at the top. Yeah, dude, that's a perfect trade. All you needed was CD. Yeah, that's a great. This is the point. You go get the stud that's going to be the number one, no doubt, can win me the week.
Absolutely,
that's what CD can do more than Debo.
Alejandro, I traded Cup and Pollard for Hill. Come on, too. If Pollard wasn't sniffing my lineup, I think this is a trade that is that. I think this is a good trade.
Yeah.
Hill a couple weeks ago, this would be a trade that you could have made a couple weeks ago as well, along with today. Again, we're not saying, although we do think if Tua plays, like if it was a Madden vacuum, he's a great quarterback. He's going to be good for the rest of the season. But the fact that he's not wearing a Guardian cap, it's going to look different. And he could be out again.
Wait, he's not wearing the Guardian cap?
No. He's made it.
How stupid is he?
He said, I have made a personal decision and I'm not doing it.
This guy doesn't retire. He just wants to retire from football. He wants to
I don't get it. I don't get it. Pittman might get traded and pop off because he was your number 2 most failed trade. For anybody out there, there's a good chance that at some point in time.
I don't like this negative thinking, Wumbo.
Looking at Mr. Wumbo's roster, it is totally possible to go from 0 to 5 and win your way into the championship match. You just have to make those moves. Quincy, everybody who's watching right now, we do appreciate all the thumbs up. So if you are liking what you're watching and you want to hear more and you want to join us again, we're usually on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of every week until seasons end. And then after that,
that's right,
we still are going on. And, like, subscribe, follow, so that you can tune in every time that we're on. Quincy, my running backs are Kyron Bigsby, Moss, Tracy Algier. He wants my Kyron for Tyreek. I would have to drop Mooney for Hill. My wide receivers would be Lamb, Cup, Tyreek, Debo, Jennings, and I own Tua. Should I keep Kyron? I would keep Kyron. I understand the want to go out and get Tyreek, as we just said to a couple people who went out and got Tyreek. But I think on your roster right now, if I were playing starter roulette here, that Bigsby and Tracy would probably be my starters if I were to get rid of Kyron and move on from that. But I see the value, like we said to PJ, about going out there and getting the best player in the deal. But I think you're already sitting there with one of the best players in the deal in Kyron Williams, especially knowing what you'd have to start at running back on that back end after that trade. If it were me, and like PJ Nasty just shared, if you can go out there and move a piece like Debo and maybe a piece like Tracy and hold on to Kyron to go out and get Tyreek, I would feel better about that. But I would keep Kyron if I'm sitting here right now. I'd keep Kyron.
So, Bob, before I jump into this answer, I think we should jump into KJ's deep dive since we haven't had one in a while, and we're about to hit the 5 o'clock dumping of quick hits on us.
Let's clear up the quick hits too. We have a lot of quick hits recently, as well.
Fair enough.
KJ, we haven't forgotten about your deep dive as well. So Ayush, I have Josh Allen, Saquon, Chase Brown, Tyreek, Zay Flowers, Laporta, Pickens, Aubrey, Braylon Allen, Quorum, Leggett, Mostert. Would you give up J.K. Dobbins for Brian Robinson Jr. or Brian Robinson Jr.? I think where I fall on both of those, and we've talked about J.K. Dobbins and Brian Robinson a lot over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Brian Robinson has a role. He fits that role really well. J.K.
So who do I want to trade to go get him, though?
He fits it really well.
Who do you think? I would say Leggett is a good starting point for the conversation for Dobbins or Robinson. You might Leggett and Brown combo is what I would want to do for that.
If I wanted to move into Brian Robinson or J.K. Dobbins, Ayush, I think with Pickens' performance, you can play this by ear. I think you'd have to move Pickens and another player to move into.
I think Chase Brown has to be involved, because if not, you're going to have roster hell every Sunday morning. If you include Chase Brown, it's easier to get the trade through, and then you have a nice you're in my starting lineup. I don't have to think about it.
And you could even probably, unless I don't know how you feel about Juju Ayush, but you could, if you're willing to move one of those wide receivers, you could probably get that deal done pretty soon with a Chase Brown and Juju. I think it's a lot to give up for Brian Robinson, but it's fair to think about that, because people aren't going to want to.
Chase Brown and Juju is a lot. I would do Chase Brown and Leggett. I mean, but
people might not want to move laterally. It really depends. PJ chiming in over the London Smith CD conversation there.
Oh, I'm Smith over London all day, man. You'll never convince me out of that.
Dom, do I trade Chase Brown for Cade Otton? I have decent running backs.
I would do that, Dom.
Gibbs, Bucky. I would consider it, Dom. It's a lateral move or it's not a lateral move. It moves you into position of need. And I think it's fair enough. I just don't really like trading a running back that has so much potential for a tight end, but you're trading him for a potential top 4 tight end, and that makes a lot of sense.
And Bob, before you jump off that, put Dom back up there real quick. I want to give Dom nominee for our best looking team player. That kid's ripped. I mean, look at
him. Yeah, truth. Should I trade Mason to the CMC owner for Kareem Hunt? This is worth exploring.
Yeah, that is worth exploring.
Just understand that both of these players, their windows, they have windows. Both of these players have windows, and both of them are probably going to be valuable assets to their team when the top talent eventually returns. Kareem Hunt is so valuable right now. And Jordan Mason, he's performing, but not performing to the extent that we want as a fantasy player right now. Don't chase those touchdowns that Kareem Hunt's having, but it's definitely, just know the Kansas City's offense is going to be in the red zone. So is San Francisco's. So, for me, I think this is something to really consider. But
I just think this, though. I think I'd rather roll the dice on CMC stays out longer than Pacheco, because CMC's is given it's a soft muscle injury. Pacheco's it's a bone. It'll heal. It's going to heal. Then he's going to immediately back in. Mason has performed so well.
So is Hunt.
You could slow ride CMC all day.
Man.
I think Mason might have a longer shelf right. I would not have thought that 2 weeks
ago. I will say is the way that the Steelers are performing, week 17, if that's your fantasy playoffs and Hunt is still playing, it's worth considering. He has games.
It's also Christmas Day.
He has games against Vegas, Tampa with we just saw Derrick Henry clobber Tampa Bay. Against Denver, which might be a little bit tougher, Buffalo, Carolina, and then Vegas again. So I think Hunt's schedule looks really nice. So I'm in on Hunt, X. I'm in on Hunt. Rest of season, QBs, may Russ to have Geno Smith. Do I drop Geno Smith and pick up 2 of them, or keep Geno and pick up only 1? I really like what Drake May has been doing. I mean, he's been breathing life back into the Patriots franchise this year. I think if I were to order this long-term over the course of the season, that injuries notwithstanding, although they are part of the game, that I would like to do, Tua. It's okay to keep Geno, like we said earlier, but there is a point where he might drop off. So I'm on Tua, Geno, May, and then Russ, because Russ always has that impending doom of Justin Fields if something were to go haywire within the Steelers locker room.
I don't think that's actually true. I think that's a very false statement, Bob. This is Russ's team forever.
Is George Pickens finally playable? Man. Absolutely. George Pickens is back on the menu. As I said earlier, he's especially back because that after his bye week, he has some really great matchups, extremely great matchups. Bed.
Oh yeah, Cleveland don't cover anyone.
Just so everybody knows, we're clearing through a lot of these quick hits right now and then jumping back into deep dives. If you're just joining us and you want a question answer, type in quick hit for if you want a short answer, a couple sentences, maybe in either or. Deep dive if you want to spend a little bit more time and you have a little bit more time to talk about them. Currently, we have 3 deep dives, I believe, in the queue. Joe's going through it right now. Would you trade Jordan Mason for Mike Evans, 0.5 PPR? Not with the injury. I wouldn't do that with the injury. If you would have told me this on Monday prior to the injury, I probably would have said yes. But right now, I'd say no.
Yep.
This statement is hilarious, Mr. Wumbo. Looking at this and saying, there's been so many injuries, because we were talking earlier about the secret stash of NFL drugs that make players better faster. But J-Mo's been stealing them. I just think that's really funny. Daniel, guys, who should I drop for Tua? Tolbert, Kirk, or Douglas in PPR? If you need a quarterback, I think that my order of operations in terms of the dropping order would probably be Kirk, Tolbert, then Douglas. That would be the order that I would put him in. What about you, Joe?
So in terms of who to drop, dude, Kirk is so hard for me.
I know.
He should be doing much better than he is. He's been relegated so far down, but at the end of the day, I think it has to be him, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's so sad.
KJ, should I drop the Jets defense and start streaming defenses every week? Daniel brings up an incredible point. So we have talked about this earlier, that even with a team like Minnesota's defense that has potential to get turnovers on a week-to-week basis, most kickers, most defenses are streamable every week. Andy Siebert just lit me up in my matchup. He gets 17 points. You can. It really depends, right? It really depends. But I think I would drop the Jets defense. I think they're not doing enough on paper or turnover wise to make me want to keep them. Ross, 18.5 PPR, looking to swing for the fences. Trade Connor Dobbins for CMC, or trade Connor Dobbins, Reed, and Devonta Smith for Derrick Henry and CeeDee Lamb. My other running backs, pardon me, are Barkley, Achane, and Jacobs. And my other wide receivers are Neighbors, Hill, and Nakua. Now, Ross, while this puts you into a difficult spot in terms of, your one player on the bench kind of position, I think you're clearing up a lot of room with that second trade. And if it were me, you're giving up a lot, but you'll be starting the two best running backs in the league outside of CMC when they're healthy, in terms of potential upward scoring, other than Brees and Gibbs and Bijan. You have Neighbors, Hill, you have Nakua, you're getting back Lamb, so you're starting potentially the rest of the way, and we're in an 18 league, so we understand it as well. 3 top flight wide receivers the rest of the way. I'm okay. You're giving up players that I really like in this deal, but I would do that. It makes your team weaker if an injury were to happen, but not by much, because to be honest, you want to start, with Tua coming back, you want to start HN. Jacobs is probably a must start every week. Dobbins not stiffing your starting lineup. Connor is. And with Reed and Devonta Smith, you're probably going back and forth on a weekly basis. I'd do the second trade, and I think I'd run in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm doing that second one right there, getting CMC and starting CMC and Barkley every week. You're set.
Yeah. You're doing CMC instead?
I want CMC, yeah.
Lamb? You don't want Henry or Lamb?
It's not I don't want Henry or Lamb. You're right. I'd do Henry or Lamb. Yeah, I totally would do Henry or Lamb.
I know you
but that Henry or Lamb one's not going through, though. The guy who gets it has a cut too many players.
Well, it might. I mean, he could be dropping Douglas or Ray Davis or something like that. Martavius Bryant failed every drug test he ever took. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
How well has that worked out for him, bro?
In this day and age, it would have been crazy. Praylin, we are doing well. Tough week for injuries for me. Godwin and Metcalf, not as bad. Yeah, I mean, Praylin, that's the difficulty with owning a guy like Godwin. He was flying sky high like Icarus, and the only way to go was to crash.
Hey, he was on my must-trade list last week.
The injury was rough.
It's not the way I want to get credit for that, but I do get credit for that.
We love when team players help each other in the chat, so thanks, Daniel, for helping out KJ with your thoughts and opinion as well.
Community, baby. Community.
I got offered JSN for Chubb. What are my thoughts? What are your thoughts on Waddle now with Tua Pack, and also the same guy offered Cup and JSN for Jonathan Taylor? That is a clear no for me. I like Jonathan Taylor going forward, coming back from the injury. Mm-hmm. If it were me, I think, I got offered JSN for Chubb. If I'm getting JSN right now and I only have to give up Chubb, now Chubb could perform well, but again, Cleveland. So JSN is on a team like we just established. JSN is on a team like we just established where they're the highest passing team, and the next highest passing team is the Jets. And they're about 10 to 20 passes behind. So I'm on team JSN, and I wouldn't look back realistically unless I really needed a running back. Then I would keep Chubb. But and Joe, I'm not even going to let
Joe. Do what you can for Chubb right now is the answer.
I'm not even going to let Joe talk about Nick Chubb. What are your thoughts on Waddle now with Tua back? I think that Waddle stabilizes. I'm not saying that Waddle's going to be fantastic, but I think he stabilizes into what we thought he was going to be. So take that for what you need to take.
Me and you are a little different on this. I have Waddle. I think he's going to be above stabilizing. I really do think Miami is going to just show up and ball out. Two main reasons, most of which is the political backing behind it. You're the smartest person in the world, and you didn't produce anything at all. Yeah. Sure, we know Tua wasn't there, but that entire regime is on the chopping block, and he's going to have to do 4 weeks of squeezing all the juice he can out of his brain and that speed to make himself look good. And Waddle and Hill are the beneficiaries.
Yeah, it really is.
And then he's
for For anybody that just joined the chat right now, we're rolling through a couple of quick hits. If you just asked a question and you want us to just quick hit it, just put QH in the chat. If you want us to deep dive it, put DD. We're a little bit behind on the DDs, but we want to clear up all these quick hits, and we will honor the DDs.
We're only actually 2 people's DDs behind.
Great. The Kyler run is crazy. It put me in a position to potentially win, but the guy I was facing, their defensive players went off. Antoine Winfield Jr. ended up coming back and just destroying my life.
Listen, going with Kyler Murray is like having your retirement strategy based on the Powerball. Like, do you want to do it? Is it a smart idea?
No,
no, but it feels awesome when it works.
It's like putting your retirement savings into AMC theaters, and then it pays off, and you're like, yes, I want to keep doing that, and then it goes back down. Marlon, good to have you back, Marlon. CD Lamb for Drake and Puka. I need future wide receiver production as I lost Ayuk. The wide receiver room is Brian Thomas, CD, and Devonta Smith. As I sit here on Tuesday, Marlon, I really don't want to give up CD Lamb. And I'm not sure how much production you're going to, like with Drake London there. I'm not sure how much he very much differentiates from Devonta Smith or Brian Thomas on a weekly basis, to be honest with you. Puka's a nice get on the back end there, but I'd try to come up with something else, honestly, to tell you the truth, because we don't really have news yet, and I'm checking because I have been at work all day. I do want to check in. So they open the practice window for Puka right now.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully he can get up to
21 days from now is what he has.
If he doesn't,
he has to go after the next 21 days.
If I were trading into Puka right now, Marlon, and you're looking for potential production, I would try to just think of a trade for Puka right now, because I think CD, Devonta Smith, and Brian Thomas should serve you well enough. But I would try to come up with something for Puka, and we can deep dive that maybe a little bit later. Trade JT and Christian Kirk for Bijan.
You're the one who loves Bijan more than me, dude.
I mean, it's a reasonable enough trade for the fact that you're moving Christian Kirk off your roster and freeing up another roster space to potentially go out and make another move. I like JT a lot.
You have to do this trade. This isn't a think about it. Atlanta's going to score so many more points than the Colts. They're equivalent in their skill set. You have to get Bijan on your team. You got to be on Team Bijan.
Yeah, the only reason I'm kind of waffling on it, Joe, isn't because of the player. It's because Week 11, they're moving into Denver, then the bye, then the Chargers, then Minnesota. That is kind of a rough tread, and it leads you right into the fantasy playoffs with Bijan. That's the only reason why I would maybe not think about it. I know this is a quick hit, but JT does have similar things too, and he has Week 15 in Denver, so I'd move on to Bijan. I think it's reasonable. CJ Stroud or Geno Smith this week? No, you're no problem at all. It's good to be 6-1. We love to hear when we're winning. CJ Stroud or
we're here to make you winners. We want you all to get to this status.
I like CJ Stroud this week. I'm not taking this performance as a CJ Stroud did awful. I'm taking this performance as Joe Mixon just lit up the fire, and CJ Stroud didn't have to do as much. It's perfectly plausible that Joe Mixon does that again against the Colts. Joe Mixon could go for like 150 yards and 7 touchdowns.
Joe Mixon gives you 2 weeks a year. He goes insane like that and then returns to nothingness. It's not plausible it's coming back.
Dude, this is different. Okay.
That was
the Bengals. This is Houston.
I'm aware.
Okay. He's already done it 3 times this year. So I still like CJ Stroud.
I'm going Stroud too.
I still like CJ Stroud. Are we sure that CMC's ready? Like, that's the thing. I'm okay.
No, we're not.
I'm not sure at all. If I'm trading for CMC, it's like it is some mid-range back-end players that maybe I'm not thinking about starting right now and paying in to get CMC. I do like the idea of having him for the stretch run, but more the weeks go on, the more I worry about it. Thoughts on trading Tyreek for Cooper Kupp? Good or bad trade, Scorpio? I think I'd stick pat on Tyreek. I like Cooper Kupp a lot. And the metrics point that, if he's healthy, he's going to produce really well.
Sure is.
But I do like Tyreek too. Cooper Kupp, Cooper Kupp is dependent upon Cooper Kupp. Tyreek is dependent upon the quarterback that they throw behind that offensive line. So if Tua plays, Tyreek will be fine. If Tua doesn't, it's not worth owning him. So I think I'm on Tyreek right now, but I think it's close.
Fair way to put it.
Should I do Jaden Reed for James Cook? My running backs are Aaron Jones, Hunt, Mason, Pacheco, and Brooks. My wide receivers are Jefferson, Tyreek, Shakiro, Dunze, and Lazard. I don't. Here's why, Mondo, just as a quick hitter here. This is a reasonable trade. It makes sense. But let's think about your team for a moment. In a 3 wide receiver league, you're probably starting Jefferson, Tyreek, and Shakir. Shakir's got a good amount of looks when he's on the field, which is really nice. Where are you slotting James Cook into your lineup, Mondo? Because you're starting Hunt and Aaron Jones if they're healthy. You're also thinking about starting Mason. So this gives you more. This gives you the same problem you're having at wide receiver, but now at running back. It gives you the same exact problem here. So while I think rest of the season, James, these two guys are some of my favorite players going into the season. I don't think you need to do it, but I think if you want a running back, this is a reasonable trade to make. If you want a running back, this is a good trade to make to buy into.
I'd rather have Reed.
But yeah, I mean, it all depends on what
I'd rather have Reed.
Mondo. Top 5, welcome back. What's your thought on playing Pickens and Najee this week? My other options at running back are Mostert and Rashad White, but with Debo out, I have to play Pickens. I think that Pickens is a decent enough play this week. We talked a little bit earlier about the pass rush of the Giants and how they are capable of shutting down some quarterbacks. Like Joe Burrow looked fairly pedestrian against them. Jalen Hurts threw up a regular Jalen Hurts style stat line against them. Rashad White, again, is back on the menu with these injuries. Mike Evans is out. Godwin is out. We'll have to look a little bit more into the data going into this week, top 5. But I think Rashad White is a reasonable play this week. And Najee's heating up, but I don't know if this is the right spot to start Najee.
This is basically the question. For the last 2 weeks, for the first time in literally 5 years, the Steelers have scored more than 30 points 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
do you think they're doing it a third week? Now, granted, there's an
good.
entire different administration in between there. Najee is running like he wants a job. There's no way around that. He's a free agent this year. I personally don't want to put 2 Steelers on my lineup, and I would go with Mostert. That's what I would do if I were you.
And we'll if you join us tomorrow and Thursday, we can talk a little bit more about it. D-Wave, I have Dobbins, Kyron, Brian Robinson, Kupp, Tyreek, and Brian Thomas. That's nothing to scoff at. I love that. Being offered Kyler Murray, Laporta, and Zay for Kupp and Kraft. I have Dak and Purdy. What's your thought? It's unnecessary. Are you in a 2 quarterback league? If you're in a 2 quarterback league, even if you're not, it's not worth owning Kyler Murray right now. Especially if you have Dak and Purdy. Dak is just as capable to throw up a game like Kyler is as well. Both of these guys don't use their legs, so their floors are a little bit lower, but they're the same type of floor as Kyler. Unless you're starting 2 quarterbacks, D-Wave, and you can put into the chat if you are. I don't see this trade as being a necessity. You can take that for what it's worth, but I think I'd rather have Kupp over Zay, and I'd rather have Laporta, especially with Jameson Williams potentially being out over the next couple of games, over Tucker Kraft, because Tucker Kraft, although he's getting a good amount of targets and good amount of valuable targets, the team is, it's a little bit up in the air about what it's going to be on a week-to-week basis.
Mm-hmm.
Plug in my iPad. Joe, what do you think about that?
So as I look at that, as you cut out on me there, Bob, again, I think first and foremost, I hate Comcast. I want to start with that as like the theme of the day. But I like again, Bob. I agree with you on this, Bob. You're hitting. This is like the opposite of last week, where I feel like we fought against each other constantly. I feel like you're just in zone today.
It's
well,
one.
I do
QB.
think we do gotta get to one of these deep dives.
Yeah, D.
KJ's been waiting a long time.
I know. Let's just clear it up. We're almost there. We have another deep dive coming in. Let's clear up these.
Clear it up for 20 minutes.
Trade Garrett Wilson and Olave for Amari Cooper and T. Higgins.
No. Joseph, I can go on this all day for you. You don't want either Cooper or Higgins in your playoffs. As much as you want to get rid of Garrett Wilson, which you should, not those two. Find two better trade partners.
Allen. So Donnie, Allen, Diggs, Barkley for Purdy, Henry, London. My team is Allen. My best wide receiver is Diggs. So I need a solid wide receiver. Outside of last week's game, Diggs is a solid wide receiver.
Yeah, I'd stick with him.
He doesn't have the name recognition, but I just want to point this out to you. Just sorting by fantasy points, Diggs is in the top 6, tied with Jaden Reed. So he's solid. He had a bad game last week because the whole passing game had a bad game. I like the idea of moving into Henry, but you're giving up too much. I'm sticking with Allen, Diggs, and Barkley, and I'm trying to come up with something different if I want Drake London. D-Wave, we can give you a deep dive on that a little bit more if you'd like. We can definitely do that. Jackson, we see you there. Marlon, should I trade Saquon, Mixon, and Brian Thomas for Bijan, Montgomery, Reed, and Hunt? This could be a good trade. It absolutely could be a good trade. You're trading a lot of assets there. So just reasonably speaking, Marlon, where are you going to put them in your lineup? So your team, from what I remember, is fairly solid. Saquon and Mixon are top-tier talent right now. Brian Thomas is electric. Bijan's top tier. Montgomery, we'll see what that injury plays out to be, is a top-tier person. Reed and Hunt are also top tier. I don't see the necessity of doing this because you're getting back the pieces you're getting. I would look. Let's look at the schedule a little bit more, and we can do that tomorrow, Marlon. But I think I'm sticking on Saquon, Mixon, and Brian Thomas Jr., even though there's a lot of players I like on the other side. All in one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Starting lineup, and we can talk about it more tomorrow as well or later today, Marlon. Starting lineup is Burrow, Gibbs, Jacobs, London, Flowers, Kittle, Pollard, benches Swift, Cousins, Dowdle, Higgins, Kelsey, Waddle, Watson. Currently 3-4 on a 3-win win streak. Love to see that. On a turnaround trade I made. Should I keep the team or should I make any moves? All in one. I'm going to star this comment. I want to come back to it, but quick hit wise, what I would think about doing is you don't need to carry both Kittle and Kelsey. I would think about packaging Higgins and Kelsey to move into another stratosphere above London and Flowers. So we're talking.
That's exactly it.
We're talking to try to move. If you can stomach it, try to move into a Malik Neighbors if you can. Try to move into, Nico's hurt right now. See what that owner's doing. You're 3-4, so you're kind of back from life or back from the dead. You got a little bit of life there, so you can start targeting players like that. I do like Flowers in London, but I think that, holding all those guys on your bench is not going to be useful for you in the long run. And what are you doing? Is that Christian Watson? I hope that's Christian Watson. But yeah, all in one. We can deep dive this a little bit later, but that's kind of my initial reaction. My 2-5 team has Debo, and if he misses this week, then the bye, and maybe misses more time, I'm probably doomed. So I'm trying to trade him, White and Pittman for Bijan. Their team's wide receiver 3 is Ray due to injuries. Wumbo, this is a perfectly reasonable offer to make them. You're selling White off of that monstrosity big game that he just had. Getting rid of Pittman, which is always a good idea, and moving Debo, who has the potential to put up 20 points on a weekly basis. I don't know if this gets accepted, but
Let's just say what it was. It was a stupid game.
If my wide receiver 3 is Ray McLeod and I can move into Pittman or Debo, I'm probably doing that trade in a heartbeat, even if it means I have to give up one of the lifebloods on my team. Nick, drop Tucker Kraft for Hunter Henry. It's reasonable. It's reasonable to assume that's something you could do, but I would try to trade Tucker Kraft before I would drop him for Hunter Henry. I'd move Tucker Kraft in a piece in a deal to get one person back and then probably pick up Hunter Henry. That's how I would approach that one, Nick. Kenny, we did not answer yours yet. We're trolling through all those quick hits that just came across the board. We're going to treat Jose's here as like a deep dive. Kenny, we're going to get to that. This is the final quick hit before we get back up to the deep dive. So, Kenny, we did not forget about you. D-Wave, you're absolutely welcome. Quincy, do I drop Stafford for Russell Wilson? I put a claim in on Wilson, and if I get him, would you start May at home against the Jets or Russell Wilson against the Giants Monday night? Realistically speaking, and I'm just going to approach this from this direction here. The Vikings, while on paper, are, like that top tier defense. And Goff is not going to throw for like 40-ish times a game. Quarterbacks against the Vikings are decent enough fantasy plays. They could get a lot of turnovers against them. So I don't know necessarily if I'm dropping Stafford for Big Russ. But to your point of your question, I think I'm out of the two options that you're given, I would start Wilson against the Giants over Drake May. Given that as it's structured there.
Yeah.
Cam, see you there. And Dennis, we see you there as well. Let's get back up into some of these deep dives. It goes KJ and then Kenny. So we're doing KJ, Kenny, then Jackson, then Zai. Then we'll go to Jose and then all in one. And we'll structure it just like that. So KJ, better waiver at wide receiver, Bateman, Pearsall, Juwan Jennings for rest of season. And should I drop either Juju or Christian Watson for one of them? So here's my initial lean here before I go grab some water. Joe would have told you, and I thought he was crazy in telling you this in the offseason. He said, Bob, I really like Rashad Bateman this year. And I said, why? Lamar Jackson doesn't like Rashad Bateman this year. In terms of fantasy points in a PPR league, he's the 26th wide receiver. He gets the long balls. And he's been doing, and the offense has opened up in ways that we haven't seen in the past because the running game has not been good. And so the way that this team is functioning, basically all these players are on the table to start. Some of them being more frustrating than others. Rashad Bateman, for his part, while he only has 20 receptions on the year, he is, like I said, the 26 fantasy points getter on the year. But when we go into his receptions, he's sitting down there at 53rd, tied with Rashid Shaheed, Tank Dell, Greg Dortch, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Debo Samuel. Okay? Well, he has 21. So he's tied with Cortland Sutton, Trey Tucker, and Jerry Jeudy. So he's doing a lot with what he's been given. Juwan Jennings, on that same end of the coin, is doing a lot with the opportunities that he was given, with 25 receptions on 36 targets. So same kind of framework. Pearsall's not in the conversation yet. So as I see it right now, I think that both of these players have some good long-term value. Bateman's role on the team is staying in that role. It's not changing, okay? So if you're willing to stomach bad games and good games from Rashad Bateman, I say it's worth thinking about doing that. He led the team, and, he's had some really crappy games, but he's usually this year, he's been in the 7, 7, 11, 3, 15, 11, 22. He has some tough games coming down the pipeline, but it's worth thinking about. Juwan Jennings, to his credit, like I said, is going to carve out a role on this team. But Kittle is still a primary target, and Debo, when he's healthy, will be a primary target. But when one of those wide receivers goes down, his target share goes up. And even in games where those wide receivers were playing, he still got a good amount of targets. The question is, with his yards per reception, right? He has a high yards per reception. And if we go to Bateman's yards per reception is probably pretty much in that same framework as Jennings when you go in and look at the stats a little bit more. Yeah, almost exactly the same, with Bateman's being a little bit higher. So if you want a concrete role, I'm going Bateman. If you want the potential for multiple-ish blow-up games, I'm going Jennings. Because I think
which one are you cutting?
I'm not picking up Pearsall, and I'm probably cutting Christian Watson.
All right, so we agree Watson's the one that should be cut, and you shouldn't pick up Pearsall. You're right.
Yeah. So
where we disagree here is I'd actually want to have Jennings regardless. The role in which you're going to get out of Jennings, we know is a stacked position. The thing with Baltimore is, yes, Bateman's starting to show up, but Bateman's also kind of just showing up for the same reason Jennings went out in the first place. No one really felt like covering him. And it was a schematic conscious decision. As we go forward in the rest of the year, my biggest fear with Baltimore and Bateman is that they're basically just giving it to the high-profile guy who's been making noise, unless your name's Derrick Henry, because then they're always give it to Derrick Henry. So they started it to end since then. Well, as a result, the one who hasn't been getting the love has been Zay. So I fully suspect as this wheel of time of Baltimore settles down is that the Baltimore number 2 receiver position stabilizes within itself. And that means it will simmer it down. Now, I was big on Bateman, but I was big on Bateman as a 19th round pick, normally when I was stacking him with Lamar, because I wasn't paying up to get the other high ones with him. So when I look at rest of the season for here, I believe the best thing for you, KJ, is going to be getting Jennings, cutting Watson, and that should give you the best combination of high upside and startability because he is their number 2 receiver for the remainder of the year. And then you also owned McMillan and Evan, so Evan just goes on your IR spot right there real quick. So that's going to be our deep dive answer there. We saw we got 9 new fresh quick hits sent our way. Let's make sure they're all quick hits before I say that out loud. We got a bunch of quick hits. Wombo, I love you giving me answers left and right. So do I drop Stafford for Wilson?
We already answered that, Joe.
And put a claim on Wilson.
We already answered that. I already
did that one, Bob. Mm-hmm. This is why you're in charge of the questions.
Mr. Wombo, I hope so. I really hope so. Cam, would you boys trade Justin Jefferson, Kelsey for Mark Andrews, CMC, Waddle? I wouldn't.
No, I want J. Jeff.
Yeah, I wouldn't, dude. You have J. Jeff and Chase in a 10-man PPR league and Nico coming back. I don't think I know that Andrews has put together a couple of good fantasy point games, but again, he's still doing it on a low target volume as well. Travis Kelce is going to have games where he does well. And I understand you wanting to go after CMC, looking at your running back room, but I would try to put together a different type of trade.
Yeah, Cam, I would simplify this if I were you. I would say just straight, and I'd also simplify it and spend less. I would do CMC for Amari and Pacheco.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would put at him and see what you can
get.
Something
like that. Yeah, I would rather do something like that, to be honest with you. Holy crap. 55 plus points on the season. They must have gotten crushed with injuries this week. Everybody did, though. Dennis, Bijan, Puka, and Evans for Neighbors, Cooper, and Kamara. I have Godwin and Evans. Evans is out this week for sure. Godwin, maybe out the season. We're not going to speculate on that yet. I think that
I don't want to do that trade at all.
I think that I'm still holding on to Bijan and the Puka, but I would structure this trade a little differently, Dennis. I'm okay moving on into Neighbors. I'm also okay moving into Cooper if I can flip him a little bit later in the season. Kamara, I'm not super interested in. This is a trade of evening outs to me. Maybe I would trade Bijan and Evans, even dealing with the injury. Maybe I would try to go after Neighbors. But without knowing the rest of your team, Dennis, it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
He with the long balls better sit softly. He can't even catch 5 passes a game. Mr. Wumbo, this is what I said to Joe. This is what I said to Joe early in the season.
All off season.
Even if he is valuable, he's got to catch more targets a game. Even in a game where he's targeted 8 times, he still only catches 4 passes. You look at his reception totals for the year, he's only topped out at 4 passes. But the last 2 weeks, he's been thrown 4 passes and has caught 4 passes. So you got to like those numbers just a little bit. Apollo, George Pickens or Devonta Smith the rest of the year? Apollo, I'm not sure how to describe this one, but there's reason to say that both of these players will probably finish pretty close statistically. However,
I'm much more confident Devontae.
George Pickens, I feel, when we look at what George Pickens' background is, I feel like George Pickens will collect those numbers in bigger bunches, but Devonta Smith will slide them across the whole season. So how I view this as being is something along these lines. You could see George Pickens throwing up a 20-point game, a 7-point game, a 22-point game, an 8-point game, an 11-point game, where Devonta Smith will be a solid like 13 going through. So that's my initial viewpoint on that, Apollo. What are you doing, Joe?
I think someone just ran into a Comcast truck in front of my house here.
Are you serious? Because that's funny.
Someone slammed into someone. I just hope it was into a Comcast truck.
I hope so. The power company said they cut off they turned my power off and turned it back on. And there was trucks there this morning and nobody said anything to me. And my wife was home all day. And she said the power was fine all day. And I get an email from the power company and they're like, oh, your power's back on. I'm like, what? I didn't know it was off. You never told me. So screw big companies like that. Traded Jamar and Love for Stroud, CD, and Aaron Jones. Landon, this is a reasonable trade to make. I do love Jamar Chase. I do love Jordan Love. But you're getting back one of the best wide receivers in return. Plus, you're getting a back-end running back one. You're getting a back-end running back one who's going to start for your team. I like it. Nick,
yeah, I take CD in that.
Drop Dell for McMillan. I've got Amon-Ra, Devonta Smith,
yes.
MHJ, and Shakir as my other wide receivers. It's willing for I'm willing to take the dart throw, Nick, on McMillan.
Because Dell ain't playing anyway, so you might as well get the one who has potential upside.
I do still like Dell, but Bronson, should I try to move Debo? It's worth considering, but if you don't have to, I wouldn't. If you don't have to, yes,
no, because Debo's not the peak of its value, and he has a chance to absolutely blow up now. Debo, if you're willing to sit on Debo and take the risk, this is still a passing game that is projected to go through the ceiling. You're not going to have pneumonia forever. I don't know what to say it.
No, I'm not saying that. He's asking, should I try to move off Debo? And I said...
And I'm saying no, because his value is so low perceptively that you're not going to get anywhere near the return for him. I still have Debo as a top 10 receiver for end of the year. You're not going to get that.
Joe, we just saw a trade up here in the top, right? like Mr. Wumbo's trying to
I mean,
trade Debo.
who is giving you AJ Brown for Debo right now? You're not getting that trade done.
But Joe, if you can at least propose a trade, including Debo with Rachaad White, to move into something even higher than Debo, statistically, I think it's reasonable
If
to
you
say.
get someone to give you higher than Debo, you take it. I'm just saying, realistically speaking,
I'm
you're not
not
going to get any of
making-
the top 6.
Bronson, I'm not making a lateral move out of Debo, but it's reasonable to assume. It's reasonable to assume that if healthy and you can wait around for him, but if your record's like 2-5 or 3-4, you might want to consider that. Yeah, it's a possibility. Trusting that he stays healthy. Pneumonia, I mean, it is a thing that could linger with you, could cause some problems, but we'll have to sit out and see, right? But it is worth considering. But everybody knows that. So they're not going to be paying top dollar right now for Debo, like to Joe's point. Landon, my team now is Allen, CD, Tyreek, Saquon, King Henry, Bowers, Bijan, Jones, Chubb, Waddle. Dude,
that's exactly
you're
my
set,
point.
Landon. You're absolutely set. That trade was an elite level trade for your team. T-Money, I'm happy as fuck I took advantage of the 1-4 guy on the bye week and traded Connor and JMO for Gibbs. Hey, T, this is what we're saying, right? Gibbs isn't going to have.
Bob, you're supposed to be the one who doesn't swear of the two of us. You're supposed to be better than that.
This is what we're saying. T, this is a trade that was absolutely legitimately one of the best trades that I've seen be made by anybody, right? You're moving off of Connor and JMO. JMO just got hit with that suspension. Connor had a great game, but Gibbs was more elite this past week. Nick, as it goes for this week, starting Ferguson or Kraft this week, my initial lean is on Ferguson, but I think I'd have to revisit that later in the week. My initial lean on Tuesday here is Ferguson, but I think I would like to revisit that. And one of the reasons why I think Ferguson is a good enough play is that, San Francisco's defense, they're going to have to move the ball against them in a lot of different ways. Tucker Kraft is legitimately a good play this week against a terrible Jacksonville defense, though. That's why I said I think I'm going to need to think about it over the course of the week. Jacksonville coming back to the States, though, that could be legitimately a problem for Jacksonville. So rolling all Packers as necessary is kind of a smart play this week. Jesse, I'm going to drop my second kicker for Njoku. Now, should I drop likely for Otten or keep likely? Right now, I would drop likely for Otten. I would do that right now.
I want to do that. I still believe in likely.
I know you do. I would do that right now. Yeah, Landon. I figured it was an 8-man league. Joe and I love 8-man leagues. I mean, everybody in the community, everybody in the community puts down 8-man leagues, but 8-man leagues are the best because the problems are catastrophically worse. So this week I was deciding. This week I was deciding.
For the record, in our 8-man league, I'm in first place by points for by 150.
Yeah, and he's still not in first place. We have 4 wide receiver. We have 2 wide receiver stars and 2 flexes.
I know, it's insane.
And my roster, my wide receivers were Mike Evans, Kupp, Debo, CD, somebody else. And I decided to start Dobbins and Montgomery in my flexes, and they let me down, so I didn't win this week. But at the same point in time, it's a more struggle, and people just don't understand it. But it's the same struggle, except we're not throwing out names like Rashad Bateman or Wan'Dale Robinson. We're throwing out
you get hit by an injury bug. Or you can ride King Henry to infinity and beyond, baby.
Screw you. Should I trade Metcalf and Pollard for Alvin Kamara, Jay?
No.
I still like Metcalf a lot. I wouldn't do that. I'd try to if I was trading Metcalf and Pollard, I'd try to find a different trade partner. Again, if you listened to us a couple days ago, maybe even last week, we talked about Alvin Kamara's production. And although he is top tier in terms of fantasy points this year for running backs, he's number 2 in the league. There is reason for concern with the constant quarterback switching that has been happening, poor offensive line play, and what we saw with him, in this past game, is that these are numbers like over the last couple of weeks, outside of that big blow up week 2 and maybe even the week 4 game, these are kind of like Javonte Williams when he's on his best day kind of numbers. And I'm not sold that I need to sell Metcalf and Pollard to get that. I think I could probably put together something else to get me into Kamara if I wanted it. He also has a week 12 bye. So if I'm struggling and I need wins, I don't know how much he helps you out in the short term in order to get that, although that game against Carolina looks pretty juicy coming up there. Can I keep rolling with Koo as my kicker? Love the kicker questions, but as I shared, it is very reasonable to play kicker roulette. However, Younghoe Koo has one of the highest outputs in terms of kickers on a week-to-week basis. We were just met with a 2-point game this past week in Seattle. He missed a field goal. He does miss field goals, okay? Like, he's a kicker that does miss field goals. So even in that Tampa Bay game, he went 3 for 5. I think it's fair enough to play kicker roulette in a 10-man league and even in a 12-man league. You look at the points, and you look just at the fantasy points. Tyler Bass, 59 points. I'm not saying I want Tyler Bass. And the best kicker by points-wise is Chris Boswell. The 3 best kickers in the league, Fairbairn, Boswell, and Siebert, all have above 80. Aubrey has 80 as well. So, I think if you don't have one of those guys, that it's fair enough that you could do that, but Koo's worth keeping. The reason I did the trade was the target share with T and Jamar, plus the schedule, and I really like CD second half of the year. We do too. We really like CD a lot. So that's a fair trade. Debo left the hospital 45 minutes ago. The only reason I'm trying to trade Debo is because I'm on my last leg and I'm like 1 and 2 losses until, Mr. Wumbo, for you, it makes sense to move off of Debo because you need to get a player to win now. That's why when I said it's reasonable to assume that Debo can be moved, it just depends upon the framework of your team. Joe's total points this season in our home league, in our 8-team home league. Joe, what is your total points? I got scrubbed this week, which was disappointing. I'm checking on my phone right now.
Let me read this off for you, baby.
Yeah, we'll get to the next questions while Joe and I look up this team.
Oh, wait, but Comcast decided to cut out right when we're talking it up.
Okay, so points for.
Right, let me read it. To get it correctly here.
Joe is sitting at, in our 18 team league with IDPs. Joe is absolutely sitting at number 1 with 1,643 points to points against of 1,572 points apiece. We have a lot of IDPs, which is skewing the.
I have lost twice as being the second highest scorer in the league. Twice.
He is 4. He is 4 and 3. We have 5 guys, including myself, that are tied at the top at 5 and 2. I have 1,000.
4 of you are tied at the top because I'm in 5th place.
1,005. Yes, I thought I said 4. 1,511 points for 1,464 points against. So, when it comes to it, I'm right in the middle.
And this is the best part of the 8-man league that I'm about to blow up here. The way we set up is like every 8-man league, you play everyone once, you play everyone twice. We do it first 7 weeks, you play everyone. Second 7 weeks, you play everyone again. So I can now go 7-0, own my destiny, and be set.
Jay, to this end, it's a 2-quarterback, 8-team league, 2 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, tight end, 2 flex, 2 linebackers, 2 defensive linemen, 2 defensive backs, a defensive player, and a kicker with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bench spots. And
which is not as big as you think once you do IDP on it.
My output could have been a lot higher this week had I decided to start Kareem Hunt over David Montgomery, but I still wouldn't have won. It's just a fun thing to do with friends. I mean, that's one of the longest.
Too much about us, Bob. Let's get into the people.
Jesse, would you trade Marvin Harrison Jr. and Dell for Jennings or just Marvin Harrison Jr.? I mean, I wouldn't, but I would consider it.
We're telling a lot of people to cut Dell for Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wouldn't
I
trade
wouldn't
Marvin
trade
Harrison
Harrison
Jr.
for Jennings, though.
I wouldn't trade Marvin Harrison Jr. for Jennings, but I
No.
would trade Dell for Jennings if that was something I could get across.
No.
Kelsey for Cup. Am I getting
Nope.
Cup? Am
Yeah,
I
if you're getting Cup, either way, I don't think I want. Unless you have so stacked at tight end, I want to have the tight end insurance blanket. I
don't
just
care,
do,
bro.
and I look at that like I don't
He
want
has
to do
Kittle.
that trade for either side.
Joe, he has Kittle.
I get it, but Kittle gets hurt. We all know that. That's what he does.
Yeah, but Joe, we've just established this. All you need is 10 points from a tight end to be in the top 10 almost every single week. Maybe 11.
I know the problem is there's only 4 of them you can guarantee will always be in the top 10, and he just happens to have 2 of them.
But he doesn't. Travis Kelce's not there.
Oh, he is moving forward. He's is moving forward.
But I will say I would do that. If I could get Cup on my team, looking at your team right now, if I could trade Kelce and get Cup on my team, and then my decision is between
you
London
you
and
could
Flowers,
really benefit from Cup.
I would do that because
I would do that.
It's not like that. That to me is a smart decision. I would trade Kelce.
I would rather move London.
Metcalf's stronger than the Hulk. He's playing this week. I simply don't care. No excuses. King Cap. Metcalf is a freak. I mean,
he is, man.
You look at his physique. He's a freak. If he does, like, he could play through pneumonia, COVID, and flesh-eating bacteria, and he'd still be amazing. Like, that looked bad, and he's still like, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Bronson, what about trading Debo, Jacobs, Mahomes, and Tua, or May, or Geno for Jaden Daniels, Joe Mixon, and A.J. Brown? I like, before we get back into some deep dives after we hit through these quick hits, I like the long-term prospects of Jaden Daniels, Joe Mixon, and A.J. Brown this year. I am okay if I'm worried about Debo. I am okay if I can turn Debo into A.J. Brown right now. I'm doing that. If I can turn Josh Jacobs into Joe Mixon, I'm doing that. If I could turn Patrick Mahomes into Jaden Daniels, I'm doing that. And I don't think Joe would disagree.
No, I totally agree with that.
I would do that. Even if
we're agreeing too much today.
Even if I had to get rid of 2 quarterbacks, I'd do it. Do I trade Hunt for Jacobs? Think I'm going to make the playoffs? I think it's reasonable in your situation, Gavin, that going after a nice, solid floor guy in Jacobs is reasonable. You look at the fantasy points. Josh Jacobs is sitting at 15 overall in a PPR league. Just checking, yeah. PPR league. Hunt, obviously, it hasn't eclipsed that yet, but not, so far behind. Sitting there at 40 in terms of running backs. If I can turn Hunt into Jacobs, although I like Hunt, I'm doing that. Caught his first touchdown, catching the ball in 5 years or something like that. Something crazy. The only thing that scares me about kickers is when setting my lineup, I don't scroll down far enough to even notice that mine is on a bye. They need to make that. They either need to get rid of kickers or they need to make that very, very clear. Up on the deep dives coming up would be Zai.
They really, the top of the app should just be blinking. You're playing 3 players on a bye right now. Go fix this.
Up on the deep dives coming up is Kenny, Jackson, Zai, All-in-One, and Jose. So if you're still around, stick around. Jose, we got you. We have not forgotten about you. You are up on the deep dives. We're going to clear all those deep dives coming up. So we're going to ignore a couple of quick hits coming down. We're going to clear those deep dives. Jackson, I got to head out pretty quick. Changing my DD to a quick hit. Okay, fair enough. Would you package Garrett Wilson and Reed for any of Amon, CD, Neighbors? I'm 6-1 in playoff lineup will be A.J. Brown, Puka, and whoever I got. I would package Garrett Wilson and Reed for CD. Absolutely. I would also consider it for Amon-Ra. We can even deep dive this for you tomorrow, Jackson. So if you're going to join us tomorrow, we'll move your deep dive to tomorrow, and we'll start the top of the show with your deep dive tomorrow. We'll start the top of the show with the deep dive tomorrow. I would do that.
Remember that, Bob. Have that written down so we do it. Because if not, I'll forget.
Mr. Wumbo here. Gun to my head. I need to name 10 kickers in the NFL in 60 seconds. I might be dead. We all would. I mean, you got Koo. You got Koo, Fairbairn, Siebert, Aubrey, Tucker, Bates. You had Narveson, but he got cut. You have Sanders.
We're the boss.
Maybe that's 10. Maybe that's 10. But we'll move Jackson's question to tomorrow. I'm gonna say 16,000. Yeah, it's like Chuck E. Cheese tokens. I just misread that. It's been a long day. Nino, I need help. I'm trying to flip cups. Still, should I try getting Drake London? Joe will tell you no. I think I don't want to flip cup for London, but the targets are there. Good things happen when the targets are there. He's still in the top. He's in the top 4, tied with Chris Godwin of targets. If I'm going after Drake London, I think it's equally as relevant to be tackling and seeing if I can move into Stephon Diggs and if I can move into, DK Metcalf, or, if I'm buying in low into a Nico Collins. I think that's all fair. All of those top 10 players in terms of targets have a real good pathway. Also, by the way, sneaky thing, because Geno Smith has been passing a lot, Jackson Smith and Jigba is sitting at 11 in terms of total targets on the year. Good things happen. It is reasonable to say that JSN is going to be a good piece if Geno, for all those people thinking about Geno moving forward, if Geno's able to keep it up, JSN could be a valuable piece. Jose, we will get to you. We got you. Don't worry about it. And if you can't stick around, Jose, if you're not able to stick around, you can always tune back in. We will answer your question. We answer every question.
Sure do.
Unknown. Trade Hurts, Cook, and Pittman for CD, Gibbs, and Herbert. I would. This makes your team unequivocally better. Even considering the output Hurts can put out you, I would. CD and Gibbs are leaps and bounds better than Cook and Pittman. You're giving this person a huge upgrade.
Yeah, that's not even close, dude. How are you getting someone to accept that?
Yeah, Kenny, we'll get you. We're coming up on you. You are the next person. We'll get to you right now.
Unknown. Like you're gonna have to. We'll go back and forth about how to make that happen.
Yeah, Kenny, appreciate you sticking around. So 2 quarterbacks, running back, wide receiver, flex, 1 tight end, PPR. Daniel Jones, Herbert, Flacco, Minshew, Brees, Najee, Tank, Braylon, Nico, DJ, Puka, T, Ladd, Wicks, Wandale, McBride. Love that. Thoughts on trading Minshew and Najee for AR5 and Ramondre? So, Kenny, you've been sticking with us for a long time. You've heard our views about a lot of different players. We'll break down why this feels reasonable, but might not be. Okay? So, looking on paper, Minshew's definitely a piece that you can move. Okay?
Yes.
I don't disagree with you there, Kenny. Where this discrepancy lies is in terms of Najee, AR, Ramondre. Okay? The reasoning behind not wanting to move into AR is that they're not passing the ball enough. Okay.
But what he gets by getting AR is he knows he has Indianapolis as quarterback.
That's fine. That's fair.
But the problem is you don't want Indianapolis as quarterback.
Joe Flacco for me. Okay, so let's break this down. All right.
I'm just going to be honest. So if we look at this, we know we got Herbert, so we know he's playing. So we know we got one there. You don't have a second quarterback. Unless I'm missing something here reading this, Bob.
Daniel Jones.
He needs to start 2. There's a chance with injury roulette, Minshew and Flacco both aren't playing. They screwed.
He has Daniel Jones as well. Okay.
Sorry. You literally says DJ and it blanked on me. Like, who the hell's
he has 2 DJs. Guys. He has DJ Moore and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, it hit me as DJ Moore, just written in the wrong spot. Yeah, dude, all right. So, Bob, sorry, but that's what made sense. He's guaranteed a starter every week.
Okay, where I fall on this. Okay, outside of the rushing numbers that Anthony Richardson could put up, and this is the same reason I'm against a guy like Kyler Murray, but not in a 2 quarterback league, because I do own him. I do want to move off him. Nobody wants to move into him. But had he not gotten 56 rushing yards, you would have been sitting there coming off that injury at about 3 points. Okay. Houston, Minnesota, you could pass on, but they will make you pay for your mistakes. Buffalo, Jets, Detroit coming up. Detroit, again, will also let you pass on them. Buffalo as well. So the schedule looks on paper to be something that you will be satisfied moving into with AR-15. But with AR. But the fact remains is that he's such a liability that there's only been 3 games in his career so far in the NFL where he's put up, which is probably about half.
I don't think he's finished 3 games yet. Actually, start to finish, played every offensive snap.
But what I will say to you,
we didn't do it last year. I don't think he's done it yet, Bob.
He did it in 4 games this year, Joe. He took 100% of the snaps. But
all right, wow.
When you look at the output on paper, and this is the same reason we're moving on from guys like Pittman, Josh Downs, etc. It's not worth taking on that baggage. I get that you want to upgrade your quarterback position, but I don't feel like you're upgrading your quarterback position right now. As it goes for Najee and Ramondre is one of those players, if you talk to us during week 2, he was a guy that I was willing to hold on to a little bit longer than Joe because I was hoping that we would get kind of that spark, that Ramondre mentality, okay? He's sitting here at 31 overall in terms of total fantasy points output. Again, quiet. Week 7, quiet. Week 6, hurt. Week 5 got that touchdown, but it was an early touchdown. The rest of the game, basically nothing. Outside of those first 2 weeks, he's basically done nothing. He has the Jets coming up, which are beatable, Tennessee, Chicago, which should be a little bit rougher but beatable, and then a week 14 bye. Steelers, I believe, have a week 10 bye, somewhere in there?
9.
As I look at this, and I look at from the framework of bettering your team, I don't know what this trade logistically does to make your team better other than just kind of feeling better, that you have potentially a quarterback that could give you 20 plus points a game. So here's how I would kind of think about this going forward, Kenny. I think that Herbert is a scary player to own because you're not sure what you're going to get. Is it going to be yardage? Is it going to be, touchdowns? He's been performing well over the last several weeks. Daniel Jones, also a liability. I've heard conversations that, maybe that he's not going to be starter. I think that's absurd because he does have a good connection with Malik Neighbors. So that's something to be considered as well. I think that right now, as you walk into your conversations, Daniel Jones is sitting as the 21st ranked quarterback right now in fantasy leagues, with Herbert sitting at quarterback 25. You're in a 2 quarterback league. If this is a 10 or 12 team league, you're not that far outside of the norm, to be honest with you, in terms of where your quarterbacks rank. Yes, Daniel Jones has put up 2 not so great games in a row. But again, his floor was low to begin with. And Minshew is who Minshew is. And Flacco is who he is as well. But when I look at your team more so, I'm looking to see how I can improve it and make it better. AR doesn't make your team better. Ramondre doesn't make your team better. If anything, this keeps your team exactly the same with more decisions. It keeps your team exactly the same.
Yeah, Kenny, the reality is that both players you're doing here in this trade are a downgrade from their respective positional counterpart. I understand what you're trying to do here. You want to make sure you have a starter every week going into it. All right, Anthony Richardson is not going to give you real value moving forward. Najee looks like he might actually be on a rise here for a week. Look at moving T. Higgins and Wicks. Those are two pieces that have extra baggage there anyway. That's what I would look to do. Give me T. Higgins and Wicks. Go out and try to, and if you want to include Minshew, that's fine. But I would do T. Higgins and Wicks, get a quarterback back, and then upgrade the receiver position. I would do a 3-for-2 trade, looking at what you have there. I think that's the best position.
And I think it's very clear. Kenny, that you want to upgrade at the quarterback position. I think it's very clear that you want that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also fair to assume that if I were moving Minshew and Najee, I might want to try to move and try to buy into an upward potential of a Tua. I'd want to buy into an upward potential of a Russ. I get where you're going with that, with the running game there with Richardson, but when JT comes back, something to think about there. But also, I'm not sure where to take this, right? But even if you were to buy into Bo Nix, okay, from a strictly quarterbacking standpoint, he's not the sexiest quarterback to throw out there, okay? But he can run just like Anthony Richardson can run.
No.
He can pass very similarly to Anthony Richardson. And his games can get a lot of decent garbage time. We look at the numbers that he's put up through 7 weeks. There's been only 1 week where he was under 10 points. He's had 2 20-point weeks so far this season and 2 games that were close to 15 or higher. Coming up down the schedule, he has Carolina, Baltimore, Kansas City, Atlanta, Vegas, Cleveland before his bye week, week 14. I think, realistically speaking, that if I were you, especially in a 2-quarterback league, he's sitting here as the 14th ranked quarterback overall in terms of fantasy points. I think it's reasonable to assume that I can move one of those wide receivers, just one, either Wicks or Wan'Dale, whichever one you want to move, or even Ladd, and try to move him into Nix. And this is coming from a guy that's in a 2-quarterback league, right? He's owned, he's started.
Yeah, and we can tell you with fair degree of confidence, looking at just this week, we're 85% confident that Bo Nix outscores Richardson this week, assuming both start.
Yeah, I think, you're banking on Nico and Puka to come back. You're 3 and 4. You're in a decent enough position here with these injuries coming back. Should I trade one of my wide receivers and something else? I think sitting here at 3 and 4, Puka's window has opened up. You've sat on Puka this long. His value is now trending back up in the right direction. Maybe looking at your team, Kenny, maybe you could potentially move Puka or T, like Joe was saying, and upgrade in your quarterback room. Maybe you want to go out there and get a Jared Goff.
Or once Puka comes back, you move more. You move DJ Moore once Puka comes back.
You could, but if you want to move Puka today and you want to move him into a quarterback, I think in a 2-quarterback league, it's fair to say that guys like Goff have a lot of value. But again, Goff and Nix are so tied together, and I don't know how your league views Nix, but I think Nix is a reasonable play over the next 2 games. So if he's not owned, own him. And if he is owned, I think it's fair to say I could trade Wan'Dale or Wicks for Nix, or I could trade T. Higgins for Nix and a couple pieces if I wanted a couple pieces back. I think that's the way that I would approach this, Kenny. And we can talk more about it tomorrow because the quarterback landscape is ever changing, but the top players continue to be those top players on a week-to-week basis, it feels. You're never going to get the Jane Daniels.
Kenny, I go with this. When I look at your team, when I want to look at the championship, Miko and Puka are going to be on your championship roster. T. Higgins and DJ Moore aren't. So those are the tools, your most valuable tools you can move right now and get something for it. So I look at it through that lens. Are you think you're going to win a championship starting Najee? You clearly don't. So what I would say is look around those 3 pieces and get the upgrades in return that you want, and then just put Russian roulette to make the deal work for the backside.
Steve, we do
You're
have
in a
time.
great spot. This team has championship capability if we can throw another solid quarterback on it.
Steve, we
And
do
hell,
have
you might
time
want to
for
swing for the fences.
we
Go
do
get
have time for
someone
a
who.
deep dive. Add it to
Was
the
that?
queue. We do have time for a deep dive. We're clearing up the deep dives right now. We'll return to all the quick hits in a moment. But Steve,
Yeah,
yes,
Steve, I saw you ask for a deep dive. Feel free.
we do have time.
Oh, no, we skipped Jackson's. We
Jackson's
skipped
we're going to talk about tomorrow,
because I took the other one out.
Joe, we're going to talk about Jackson's tomorrow.
Okay.
Let me just take a quick picture of it real quick so that we don't forget it. He also typed it in the chat down below as well. Zai.
All right, Z. So you're currently in first. That's awesome. You got Love Darnold, Saquon Mostert, Trace. Okay, you got a lot of dudes. What moves should we make to make you get in the playoffs? So I am totally fine. I'm just going to work this backwards. I'm totally fine with Ingram being my tight end in a championship. I think he can do it. I mentioned a couple times here, I don't believe Higgins is going to give you anything down a playoff run. You are great in the running back position. I really love Mostert as your fallback. And then obviously we're on your quarterbacks are set too. So the only the two vulnerabilities, like if I have to write a story about how your team loses, the only two viable scenarios I see happening are this. Tua comes back for 2 weeks and it's not during the playoffs and Tyreek gives you a nothing and Higgins is holding out for a contract. If those two things happen, this team's screwed. However, we're in a spot right now where we have lots of upside. So what I would recommend to you here, Z, combined Higgins and whatever piece you want to go upgrade a receiver. And then the other one I would do is let Tyreek cook for 2 weeks. Let him put up massive, stupid numbers where everyone wants him, and then do the lateral move to CD, Ahmad, or JJF. That would be what I would recommend, because those are the only two real ways I don't see this team winning, Bob. How about you?
Yeah, and
we see a nano measure.
We see a nano down there. Marlon, we see you. Jesse, we see you. Steve. We'll answer all those quick hits. We want to clear the deep dives out of the queue. So if you're still with us, we want to clear the deep dives out of the queue. But we'll get to those quick hits in a moment. Where I fall on this side is that I do agree with Joe that I think Ingram and Kraft. Ingram is a good asset for the playoff push that you're making here. I would also move on from a guy like Darnold. I know there are some injury concerns with a guy like Love, but again, rostering in a 12-man league, rostering two quarterbacks, unless everybody else is doing it realistically, it doesn't make any sense. And coming out here, looking at the framework for what what's going to happen with Minnesota. Minnesota already had their bye week, and Jordan Love is going to have his bye week soon. So at most, you're carrying Darnold just a couple more weeks, okay? So let's say you carry Darnold until after Love's bye, then you free up a roster space right there. But I think more so what I would do right now, to Joe's point, is I'd be going in and stashing wide receivers for playoff pushes. I'd be going in there and I'd be looking at the schedules to kind of match up well. And we'll get you some numbers after a little bit too. But looking at players that stack up really well with their playoff schedules and putting in some back end wide receiver talent down there, by eliminating your double position, especially your double one at Darnold. You're not going to need them after Love's bye week. So what bye week is that again, Joe? I can never keep those.
Green Bay's isn't like 11. I might be off on that. I gotta have it up. That's not my head gut.
Green Bay's bye week is week 10. So in 2 weeks, you're starting him week 10, but you're not gonna need him. You're not going to need him after
What's Darnold's matchup in week 10 anyway? So who's Darnold even playing? Is it a guy you want?
Yeah, that's the other point that I made a couple weeks ago about having multiple tight ends. But week 10 is Jacksonville. So Darnold.
So you're probably playing Darnold against Jacksonville.
Yeah, Darnold is worth keeping around for Jacksonville at anything else.
You almost didn't make an argument, and I said this before, that I believe I thought Kraft peaked out his second week in a row of 2 touchdowns. He definitely has peaked out now. So you don't need 2 tight ends. You could do Kraft and Higgins right now and get a really good return.
You could even
I would look into that type of direction.
You can do even Kraft and Tyreek. Again, Joe says to hold on to him, and I agree with him. But if you wanted to, you can move Kraft and Tyreek into something nice. You can move Debo and Kraft into something nice too, if you're worried about Debo's longevity.
See, I want to keep his first 3 receivers. I just want to get a 4th stud as insurance.
I agree with that. But I get,
because I know by the time the playoffs come around, Debo will be humming, and so will Puka. I have no fear about that.
That's fair. Nana, we see you answering that question.
Higgins and Kraft right now for AJ Brown. I'd do that in a second. So,
Jose, getting to you here, Jose, and then we're going to clear up all in one, and then we're going to get to Steve's DD after Joe Steve's DD is going to come at the back end after we answer a couple of these quick hits. Okay. So Jose, thanks for sticking around. Trade or drop advice. My team is Kyler, Jacobs, Gibbs, Hill, London, Kraft, Cook, Fairbairn, 0 defense. Bench is Chubb, Brian Robinson, Higgins, McLaurin, Neighbors, Laporta, and Njoku. I have 3 tight ends, no D. Which tight end would I trade? So looking at what you're dealing with here, I think out of these tight ends, the one that I think I would trade that has maximized his value is Tucker Kraft. Just like Joe pointed out, it's a very realistic expectation that he can continue to do good, but he's never going to continue to maximize those points as he's done over the last several weeks. So as it stands, Jose, and maybe Joe, you marked this wrong. This could have probably been a quick hit, but we'll deep dive this a little bit in terms of the tight end market because people are asking about Tucker Kraft.
Oh, he gave us a follow-up thing that said this was deep dive.
Okay. So Laporta's value is low. Laporta's value is really low. We hope over the next 2 weeks that he can feast with JMO out. But the running backs are humming over in Detroit. So Laporta's value is low right now, and you can't get a really good return for him right now. Njoku, I think, is also a solid hold, knowing that he's going to get stable production.
Well, he really has to do a 2-for-1 trade, right?
Right. So where we come off of that is that I think, logistically, I think it would be fair to say that out of your bench position players, outside of Neighbors, that both of the Washington players have a large degree of value to your team. And knowing that you have Hill and London with some bye weeks coming up, with Atlanta's bye week coming week 12, you'll kind of be safe there because neither Cincinnati has a bye week then as well. So it does you no good keeping Higgins, right? In terms of bye week.
Bob, I'm recommending the exact same trade I just did. Give me Kraft and Higgins for AJ Brown. I think that can get done.
I think it's realistic. I think it's a realistic expectation, Jose, that you can go out there today and do something like that. At least it will be countered. You will most likely get countered and probably be asked to include Chubb or Brian Robinson in a trade like that. And I think it makes your team better if you can float out there now, because it looks like you have James Cook as well. Floating out there, if you could get Hill, AJ Brown, and then put into your flex spot London and play around with Cook and Gibbs later, Brian Robinson is an extra piece there. Chubb is an extra piece there. You have a lot, and you have Neighbors as well. So you're set. You're pretty much set. I would kind of go in a different direction here. I would see if I can really, truly upgrade. And you might not want to. If I were trading one of those tight ends, I would see if I can move into a better quarterback situation by pairing Kyler and a tight end to move into a better quarterback, because I don't really trust Kyler long term. And you might have to put in extra pieces. We saw a couple Kyler trades come across the pipeline. You might be able to really do some damage there and get really set. That is, unless you like Kyler. So out of all the tight ends, I think I'd trade Kraft because he has the most value. The other two, we could play around with starting them on a week-to-week basis, Jose. I think that they're going to be fine. I think that they're going to be fine.
That's the answer. Kraft's 100% the one to trade to answer your question.
Yeah, and you'll do a 2-for-1 because you want to get somebody back on your bench. So you need
open spot. Yeah.
So let's clear up this all-in-ones here. Your starting lineup was Burrow, Gibbs, Jacobs, London, Flowers, Kittle, and the bench is Swift, Cousins, Dowdle, Higgins, Kelsey, Waddle, and Watson. When we were talking about this, and I kept this in the deep dives just as a note to ourselves, is that there's a lot of players here that could go one way or another, especially all those bench players. And at this point in time in the season, guys, we're stretching our lineups and we're trying to get the best players possible in our starting lineups with one kind of pivot point on our bench. We have too many pivot points here, and we want to maximize our starting lineup rosters. So if you're in a league that allows you to do trades right now, like we've been talking about, I think it's beneficial that we begin to talk about that and to continue to do that. So let's hit into the quick hits right here. Just going back up, making sure I am in the right department here. I believe we are on Josh's. Josh, would you pair Brian Thomas Jr., DJ Moore, or Reed with Pollard in a trade for Justin Jefferson? I think Reed and Pollard is a nice conversation starter for that trade. I think that people
unless I'm reading this wrong, he wants to put. Oh, you're saying it's Pollard's in the trade no matter what?
Yeah, Pollard's in the trade no matter what.
Right.
So
is that how I'm reading this?
Yeah. So Pollard's in the trade either way. All right.
Would want to put DJ Moore with him.
Yeah. I don't think
I'm so glad that Comcast is not headquartered in Pittsburgh, Bob. I lose my mind.
DJ Moore doesn't carry as much value as Reed or BTJ. I think that BTJ or Reed will be a nice conversation. I think that offering DJ Moore and Pollard would slightly be a slap in the face to the Jefferson owner right now. But I think that Reed or BTJ.
Yeah, you're not going to include a third piece if you're doing DJ Moore and Pollard.
Yeah. So I think right now, Josh,
you're going to need to do third piece if you're doing that.
I think that I would probably move BTJ or Reed with Pollard to do that, and I'd slightly lean on BTJ having more value to the person that would be getting him. So that might get that done, but perceived value is something. So people might not like the idea of trading BTJ into Jefferson, knowing the draft capital spent, but you might have to back end and give them something else. Steve, we're glad we found you. I think
you have to do BTJ and Moore and Pollard.
And subscribe the channel. We are glad we did not lose you, Steve. We are glad we did not lose you. Yeah, I mean, sometimes with first and last names, like, you're like, for the longest time, the Steelers had Jeff Reed, and we actually met Jeff Reed, which was fun. He was wearing a tracksuit. And that day,
yes, he was.
Joe was screaming out, Jeff Reed, Jeff Reed, Jeff Reed. It was just really, really
fun. Was. Let's point the hell out of him.
But there are a terrible amount of nicknames. Like, we like to call Minshew the Mississippi Mudflap. So when Joe and I are talking about Gardner Minshew, we call him the Mississippi Mudflap, Mr. Wumbo. Danny Dimes, I don't understand. AR5 is also terrible. I at least like creative nicknames. If you're gonna give a player a nickname,
like the rattling gun. I just need him to be good enough to deserve it.
The rattling gun would be nice. If he was better, that would be totally nice.
I want the rattling gun to be so much better. I root for him every week.
I wish Drake London was. I hope that by the end of the year, Drake London does really, really good so that he could get a really cool nickname. Like the Drake.
I wish he was like 6'4", so every time he got tackled, we could say London Bridge is falling down.
Yeah, that would be fun. I was just thinking about London Bridge, but it's kind of, apropos. Man, I think leaning toward trading CD and Javonte Williams, he wanted a little add-in, and it doesn't affect my team, for Drake London and Puka. I think with Cooper Kupp trade rumors, it only boosts value. My wide receiver room would be Drake London, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas, and Devonta Smith. And if something goes wrong,
I'll just trade what you're doing here, for a running back. But your wide receiver room's better with CD in it rather than London and Puka. So I don't want to do that trade.
Now, I can understand why you want to do it, Marlon. I really do see why you're leaning towards it. It moves Javonte Williams off your team. I get that. You're getting back a good amount of targets with Drake London and Puka coming in. And Drake London, Brian Thomas, and Devonta Smith in the short term is good enough as starters. But right now in the short term before Puka comes back, this could be just CeeDee Lamb, Brian Thomas, and Devonta Smith. So while I don't think you should trade out of CeeDee Lamb, what I do think is that we should wait a little bit before jumping on this Puka bus right now. I get that Puka's value is really low right now, but while that looks good a couple weeks from now, that really logistically,
this might be the best. I think what you do is just cut London out of the trade.
Yeah, I think London is in the trade because he wants to get back the 2 wide receivers, and I totally get it. Like, I totally understand where this is coming from, Marlon. And your running backs are Saquon, Mixon, and Rachaad White. His receiving upside, yeah, I'm there with you.
Well, I'm saying don't include right CD.
He has to. He has to. Let me circle back to this, Marlon.
So he has to get volume. Yeah, well, if you have to get volume, that's what you got to do then.
I think the trade is
at least Puka gives you the potential of matching CD.
Yeah, I think the trade is fair enough, but at least for right now, I don't know. Like, if you could wait on this trade another week, will it still go through? I'm not sure. But if I could get,
I don't think you wait with those injuries and Puka's value goes up.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think you can wait a week.
I still like the idea of CD, Brian Thomas Jr., and Devonta Smith moving forward, but I do understand the capacity in which you're speaking of here, Marlon. Bears or Packers defense this week? Packers. Brian Thomas Jr. is elite. Like, don't twist my words on that one. But the Jacksonville Jaguars coming across from the pond, 1:00 game at home. It is a big letdown sandwich coming ahead for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. The Bears, for their part, with Jane Daniels playing, if Jane Daniels plays, I'm not even thinking about the Bears defense, right? Logistically speaking, I think it's Packers all the way when it comes to Bears or Packers. Defenses this week. Which defenses here are reasonable plays? I like the Broncos defense. I've been liking the Broncos defense for quite some time, even with Patrick Surtain out. If he comes back, even better. Carolina Panthers are not that great right now. They just got blown out by their shorts by the Commanders, and Jane Daniels didn't even have to come back into that game. Chargers are legitimately a good thought as well, especially if Jake Haener starts, because we don't know much about Jake Haener. I think the Chiefs, realistically, they're on the radar for sure because Gardner Minshew can cause a lot of turnovers. And the Steelers aren't on my radar this week, even though they do play the Giants. So I think how I would figure this out would be I'd look at those injuries for the defenses over the course of this week, Bronson. And I think my order is basically the order that you read it.
There's a listing right there of our top 4 defenses. Jets defense, Pittsburgh.
I think you ordered it in the order.
See, we have Pittsburgh as our 3rd best defense this week, though.
I get it, but I don't prefer it. But I understand why. Reichard or Lutz? Reichard or Lutz this week? I think that the coach in Minnesota definitely likes believe that is Reichard, right? He likes him a lot. I think he said at one point in time that he would have allowed him to kick like a 60-yard or like 80-yard field goal, which was like absolutely absurd. He's been absolutely bombing kicks. They play the Rams. There's kind of a letdown sandwich there coming up potentially for them. Both of these kickers are top-notch kickers. Denver against the Panthers is definitely a good play, but I think I'm leaning more towards the Minnesota kicker, Reichard. That's my initial lean today on Tuesday. Drop one. Juju Algier.
All kicker questions only go to Bob. That's just the answer.
Juju Algier, Bigsby, Brooks, Irving, Ladd for Otten or Hunter Henry. I think that, honestly, to tell you the truth, that if I were dropping any of those for a tight end, it would be Algier, and I'd drop him, and it'd be either or for me. I'd lean Otten, although Hunter Henry looks good with Drake May. I pick if it's worth anything.
It's definitely Algier, and I would go Otten.
If it's worth anything, Otten wasn't available in my league, but in my 12-team league, Goddard went down with an injury. I picked up Hunter Henry. So if that's worth anything to anybody. Nano, good to have you. New here. Love newbies. Love to see everybody here in the community. Trade away Pacheco and receive Kelsey and Tracy Jr. Should I do it? Yeah. Yes. How? Nano, like that's a trade that I'm not sure. I understand people want to buy into Pacheco after seeing him on the treadmill, but if I can move Pacheco and get back Kelsey and Tyrone Tracy Jr. right
It's
now,
all perception, Bob. Perception is what moves trades.
Yeah, even if it was like a dynasty league, I do like Pacheco in dynasties, but Tracy does look good. I think I would do that. Smitty, start one wide receiver this week. Dell,
I feel like we're
Addison,
gonna
or
answer this one.
Flowers. I think we already answered this, Smitty, but I think you put it up in the chat a little bit. I'm on Flowers, then Addison, then Dell is a distant third.
Yep.
Right there. Personally, right there. Boom. Nahil, thoughts on Cook the rest of the season? I'm not. Last week with the toe, I'm worried about the toe. Don't get me wrong. That's something that I do have concern with. They do tend to be lingering injuries. I am also concerned at the splits between Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. So there are now three threats in that backfield. They all do different things. I was looking up some charts the other day, and the splits are weird versus when they use Cook versus when they use Ray Davis versus when they have used, at least last week's game, Ty Johnson. Cook is already not getting a lot of that goal line work. But Cook's yardage totals, I think, are good enough. Even with having missed a game, right? He's sitting at 14th overall in terms of fantasy points, right? So there are legitimate concerns about volume and such that like that's a legitimate concern. But when we pull down the fact that even after missing a game with the turf toe injury, he went in for a touchdown, still ran 12 times. Not what we want to see out of him, but Seattle, Miami, Indy, and KC are definitely games where if they can keep pace through the air, it's definitely worth buying into Cook. But the price has to be right. The price has to be right. Smitty, we would never forget you, Smitty. We would never forget you. We did not skip you. We would never forget you. So, Nano, thank you. But that's how I feel, Nihil, on that
No,
one.
we want it.
Joe, I think you feel pretty much the same way on Cook as I do.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thank you.
Andy and Dalton was involved in a car accident. So is this Bryce Young territory now? Love to see you back, Steve.
I think it was Bryce Tongue territory anyway.
Andy Dalton.
I mean, nothing against Andy Dalton getting hurt, but they put Bryce Young at the end of that shootout. They were getting crushed. I think Bryce was coming back regardless.
Nobody in his family required emergency transportation. So big ups to the health of Andy Dalton and his family. Hopefully everybody is safe. Mr. Wumbo, love this. Spencer Krappler. I know you want the rattling gun, but Spencer Krappler.
I still want the rattling gun. I'm not gonna stop.
Well. We're gonna get to the Steve's DD in a moment, and then we're gonna wrap up with the quick hits as well. Will, welcome back. Ethan, I have AJ Brown, CD Lamb, Amon Ra, and Nico. I remember your team, Ethan. Should I give away Kamara, Nico, and CD for Saquon and McCaffrey? Ethan, there's a lot to unpack here. There's absolutely a lot to unpack here.
I would do this, Ethan.
I like the idea of moving into Saquon Barkley, but I'm not sure you necessarily need to move into.
I like the idea of getting rid of Kamara.
I don't think you need to necessarily move into McCaffrey as well. So where I fall on this, looking at your wide receiver room, if I could get away with doing Kamara and CD for Saquon, or Kamara and Nico for Saquon, I would try that first before I do all three of these. If you're going to give up all three, it's reasonable enough that you would want those two guys back. But again, CMC's injury, we're not sure. So you're selling a lot to get back Saquon right now. CD and Kamara, CD's still going to produce. Nico right now is not going to produce, and Kamara is probably going to produce as well. So you're giving up a lot to move into those players. I think I would try to restructure this, Ethan. I would try to restructure it and either do Nico and Kamara for Saquon or CD and Kamara for Saquon. Again, you're buying high on Saquon after the big bounce back revenge game.
Minko's the one you should move though instead of CD.
That's
if
what
you're cutting the trade down, CD is the one that should.
And even if you wanted to play devil's advocate here, Ethan, and Nico's coming back off the IR soon. But if you wanted to try to just do Nico for McCaffrey and just play it by ear, you could as well. I wouldn't, but if that's something you want to consider, looking at your depth there and looking at your top 3 wide receivers, you could think about it. You're in a position of value there. I think it's also certain that you should go out and get Saquon. Nano, 2 flex league. My roster is Love, Bijan, Jacobs, London, Downs, Dell, Swift, McBride. Bench is Pacheco, Kupp, D-Hop, Trey Tucker, Watson, Lazard. So when you go back to your question here, Nano, let me go back up to the top where your question was. Do I trade away Pacheco to receive Kelsey and Tracy? So I still think I would do it. Because you're a 2 flex league. But with McBride there, Kelsey doesn't have as much value as if he didn't. I would still do that, Joe. Wouldn't you? I would definitely still do that. I'd like.
You kind of cut out on me there, Bob. But what I would do with this here,
I would still do that trade. Pacheco to receive
again.
Kelsey
The story of today is I'm murdering Comcast.
Mm-hmm. Pacheco and Kelsey.
Yeah.
Pacheco for Kelsey and Tracy. I would do that. I would do that very easily, actually. Even still knowing your team. What do you think about Rashad White and Debo for Aaron Jones or Achane? If the Bijan thing falls through, are those both fair in PPR? Dodging bye weeks will be nice. I do. Aaron Jones is a great player on the Minnesota offense. He was dealing with injuries. He does have an injury history. Achane is also a valuable piece coming back. I do think moving Debo and Rashad White could immediately get you into Aaron Jones, but I think you should be getting also another piece back. Debo, I think realistically speaking, Mr. Wumbo, that a Debo straight into an Aaron Jones is a fair-ish trade. And I also think a Debo into an Achane and a Debo with maybe a slightly less piece than Rashad is also a fair-ish trade. I'd be gunning for Bijan, though. I would be gunning for Bijan unequivocally, but I do think that those are fair. Dalton, his wife, 3 kids, and dog were in the car. He probably drives a Chevy Tahoe or a Suburban. You want to know some of the worst drivers? Some of the worst drivers live in our city of Pittsburgh, and they usually are driving Audis. So I'm sorry for anybody out there in an Audi, but you couldn't fit all of those people in an Audi. So I know it's probably a Chevy Tahoe.
He's in a truck converted SUV.
Yeah, like a Tahoe or Suburban. I have trade-off on the table. Amari Cooper for David Montgomery straight up. My receivers are good. My running backs are good. Also, one of my running backs is Jahmyr Gibbs. Should I take this? The quarterback is Allen Will.
Yes. Anytime you're getting Monty for Cooper, you should do that.
Yeah. I would monitor that injury, and maybe I wouldn't accept this until the injury report comes out on Thursday-ish. But I would do that. I think it's a fair trade. Amari Cooper is going to be good enough for the next couple of weeks. So if you're comfortable moving on from him and can move into Montgomery, I'm also doing that 1,000%. Santiago, I'm 2-5. What do I do? What trades? Burrow, Henry, Jacobs, Tyreek Evans, DK, Zay. Well, Evans is out. Ingram, Kincaid, DK might be out as well. I literally have no bench. That's okay. Ty Chandler, Gino, Sean Tucker, useless. You're okay, Santiago. You just got into a little bit of a bad string, and some of your players didn't perform, or they've had problems with their quarterbacks or other situations. If I were you,
you got yourself a pretty good week coming up here, though, Santiago. Given the fact that Tua is back, DK Zay's not going to have 2 weeks down. We mentioned a little bit earlier that the way the Baltimore's offense is going is major piece that's not giving the love. They've been force feeding it for the next couple of weeks. Henry didn't get the love early. He's been the best running back in football since. Andrews didn't get love for a couple of weeks. They're force feeding him touchdowns. Same thing is going to happen now to Zay. This is why I'm a little bit concerned about Bateman and why I think his numbers might be unsustainable. So as I look at your team, even knowing the Evans injury, the fact thing
that
might have just lagged out.
Yeah, you did. Woo, woo, boy. So here's the thing.
Is that the note we're ending the show on today, Bob, or do we have another deep dive?
No, we have another deep dive, and we have a question from Will here. We got to get to Steve's deep dive. But here's the thing, Santiago, and we can deep dive this tomorrow. You can join us tomorrow, and we can talk about this tomorrow. We have Jackson is going to start off the show, and then you can start off the show as well. Mike Evans will be sidelined until after the Week 11 bye, okay? So you're not going to get him back until Week 12. So you're going to need to do some damage control right now. And if I were you, and we could talk about this more tomorrow, I think your most valuable piece right now are both Henry and Tyreek. And while I'm not a proponent of selling either, and I think you can have a really good week this week because all your players are finally congealed together and back, minus Evans. If you wanted to do a volume-based trade, your best asset to do that with is Derrick Henry. Listen.
Don't do it.
Joe, I don't want to trade Derrick Henry, but what I'm communicating is, Santiago, and we can spitball this tomorrow as well.
Right.
Your best asset
right out this week. See what happens.
I wouldn't do it this week. Like I said, I wouldn't do it this week, but I would consider if I didn't win this week and I end up 2-6, Henry's an asset, but I don't want them to smell chum in the water though. Like I'm able to move Henry. Like a guy in my league is moving Chase and he's like, anybody want Chase? And I'm like, well, yeah, I want Chase. Floating Derrick Henry out there will be elite. Don't you dare make a King's Ransom joke. Will, who should I start in my flex this week? Neighbors, Cooper, Dobbins, Javonte, Darnell Mooney. It's nice to consider that Neighbors could be in your flex this week. I think that Neighbors might have a difficult time.
Neighbors is your flex.
I think that Neighbors might have a difficult time against Joey Porter Jr. It's reasonable to think that will happen. The Seahawks, their secondary was banged up. It's back now. We'll have to look at the numbers a little bit more there. J.K. Dobbins may be a part of this plan a lot in this game. My initial lean right now as we sit on Tuesday would be Dobbins, but I could easily talk myself into Neighbors because he could exploit that secondary as well. Gordon, I'm 2-5, just lost Godwin. It sucks, Gordon. We've all been there this year. We've been there with Rice. We've been there with tons of players. Should I trade Puka and Najee for Hunt, Tank Dell, and Chuba? Well, Chuba is an asset that has diminishing returns as well. People are saying, when Jonathan Brooks comes back, that's going to be the dog. So if it were me, I don't want to move. If I'm moving out of Puka, and Najee, I don't want to move into Chuba. So that's kind of the long and short of that one, Gordon. I wouldn't do this trade. I'd try to come up with something else. I get that you want to get more out, but I think realistically, if I was trading Puka right now, you could probably get Hunt and something else that's not Tank Dell and Chuba. Joe, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, instead of doing volume, do one better piece.
Yeah, and Gordon,
because you should be able to get Hunt and a pretty decent piece in return.
I don't like that either. Like, I think you could just do if you wanted to move on from Puka because you kept him so long. So maybe you're 2-6 next week. Maybe you're 3-5. Now all of a sudden 3-5 with an impending Puka return.
Even at 2-6, we can recover this because you don't. You need to get more. So you don't want volume in return. You need to get a stud back and then you can waiver wire yourself into a piece. You'll get a Javonte, get a Juwan Jennings or something like that.
Here,
Get
and
it,
Gordon, you just joined, but if you go back in earlier in the episode, you will hear us talking that Tank Dell, for most people, is a drop candidate. Chuba, his performances are great, but once Jonathan Brooks comes back, if Jonathan Brooks ends up being good, Chuba all of a sudden becomes a back-end candidate too.
And then you just gave away
Hunt. You just gave away Puka.
Because you could argue Najee and Hunt ain't that far apart.
They're not. They're not. Like, you look at the stat lines, they're not.
Yeah.
Statistically.
So, Steve, first off, Steve, we appreciate your journey of life, going through with us, losing us, coming back to us. You're like our favorite ex-girlfriend.
Dana, we got you.
So that being said, what do we got here? What do we look?
What are we looking at here? I'm being offered CMC. What would you give up for him?
If there was a Comcast murder button.
The guy needs a quarterback and is asking for Dak and Brian Thomas Jr. at the moment. What could I give him instead of BTJ, or is Dak for CMC fair? Steve, Joe, did you star his roster? Okay. Looking at your team,
yeah,
Dak is definitely a player that I can move on from. You don't need to hold 3 quarterbacks. You have a super flex, so it's reasonable to assume that holding 3 quarterbacks is nice. Looking at this, Dak has more value because it's a super flex league. Right now, you're sitting there with Henry Kamara and Aaron Jones. You're looking for the future. I think it's fair, especially in a super flex league, that you can probably choke this guy out in a Dak for CD trade or a Dak for CMC trade. To be quite honest with you, because
probably
we just talked with Kenny, who's in a league where there's 2 quarterbacks as well, which is essentially like a super flex league in a way.
Yeah.
Because most people do start quarterbacks in the super flex position. You don't have to, but most people do.
You should.
Right now with Stafford and Bo Nix, I think I'm comfortable being able to move on from a guy like Dak, but your wide receivers don't allow me to move BTJ, right? So sitting here today, if I'm trading BTJ and Dak, that I'm going to need to get back CMC and something else, because CMC's question marks have not gone away. I mean, the news is saying that, yeah, he's coming back, but they haven't gone away. Those question marks are still there. Jordan Mason is still there. This team is still struggling. So if they're not baked into the playoffs by, week 12, we might not see CMC this season. And so where I fall on that, Steve, is that it's too much for BTJ and Dak. But I would choke him out until I could give him Dak for CMC.
Yep, I think that's the right answer.
And be like, yo, you need a quarterback. CMC's not even playing. Dak already had his bye. You could start Dak every single game if you felt like it. I won't be starting CMC until potentially week 14. I'll see you week 14. I'll take all my players to the bank and find something else to do with them. Come see me next week. Because you don't have to do this trade now. It's not a must-do trade now because CMC's not healthy. He's not playing. So this trade can sit there. And you could just choke him out and wait him out until it becomes a trade that is relevant. Because eventually that guy, we went through all the quarterbacks that are worth starting. You have 3 of them in a super flex league that's 12 teams. You're sitting there with 3 of the top, 15 guys on a week-to-week basis. I say choke them out. I think Joe agrees. I think Joe agrees. He also has Cup.
I do.
He also has Cup, Ken Walker, and Saquon and Adams. If it were me, and let's say, Steve, you wanted to do Dak and BTJ in a super flex league, I think that's reasonable enough to move you into a Ken Walker. If not a Saquon. But I understand why people wouldn't want to do that. But I don't think you need a running back there sitting with Henry Kamara and Aaron Jones. So I think you're in the right discussion to move into CMC as a piece. Ideally, I'd want to move into Saquon, but that's going to cost you a lot. And it's probably going to cost you more than Dak and BTJ. But I could reason myself into thinking that you could choke that CMC owner out.
I think you can. I think you should.
Cena, Jalen McMillan or Sterling Shepard on Tampa Bay. You know, Tampa's tough with the injuries that just happened. I think that I'm on Jalen McMillan. He's younger, ready to move. Trey Palmer is another guy to consider down there. He's been getting some looks even in games where both Evans and Godwin have played. So I think that I'm on Jalen McMillan, Cena. And I think I'd rather spend my waivers or something on McMillan. And Wumbo, I did not know that. What is his name? Rain Dakota Prescott. How do you have a name like Rain and not stick with that? It's raining. I'd be saying it's raining touchdowns, bitches. I mean, come on. That you could sell that T-shirt to infinity. To infinity. Dak is such a weak name. Such a weak nickname, knowing that his name is Rain. Mr. Wumbo, thank you. Thank you so much, because now you have to trade him, Steve.
You just made his day, Wumbo.
You have to trade him now. He's off the roster. He's off the roster. What a punk having a cool name like that and then not using it. Well, team players, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be on tomorrow, Wednesday, around 3:45, ending around 5:36. And then on Thursday again, around the same time. Dak is always letting us down. That's the perfect ending to an episode. Dak is always letting America down. Steve, do Dak and Laporta for Ken Walker? That's fair. I would consider that in a heartbeat. And Steve, we can talk more about it tomorrow. So everybody who's joined us today, click like and subscribe, and we'll be with you tomorrow.
See you guys.
3:45. 3:45 is when we start, Steve. 3:45 is when we start.